Thank you very much, everybody. We're now back, and I want to apologise to deputations and to the public for the delay, which was an unavoidable technical problem that we had, and thank the technician who came in to help us, who's still in attendance, actually, so that we can make sure it doesn't happen again. Thank you very much. Before we move on to the first item, I would like to introduce the team from the council offices that are supporting us. Could I start with you, Juliet?
Good morning all, my name's Juliet Gill, I'm the Principal Planning Solicitor at Portsmouth City Council.
Good morning, my name's Simon Turner, Development Management Lead.
Alison Harper, Local Democracy Officer.
Thank you all very much. And we will introduce all people from the deputations as each item arises, if that's all right. So, item 1, 155 Oyster Quay, Portway, Portsmouth. Simon.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies for the delay and your patience. This is a planning application at 155 Oyster Quay, Port Solent, for a change of use from a dwelling house Class C3 to purposes falling within Class C3 dwelling house or Class C4 house in multiple occupation. The application is before the Planning Committee because of the numbers of objections received set out in the report before you. We have deputations for and against today in a few minutes, and a supplementary matters update that I shall give you at the end of the presentation. Just to locate everyone, Port Solent up in the northwest corner of Portsmouth. The image on the bottom right there, aerial photograph, shows you Oyster Quay, which is a 6-storey block wrapping itself around the marina there. So the doors into the shared doors into the flats on the external side, and the flats look backwards onto the marina, as you can see. So there's the location plan, bottom left, with the red edge around the entire element of that block, and then top left is actually the floor plan, red edge tightly drawn around the flat. And I don't think you can see my cursor, but in the top left image, just above the red edge site, there is a small parking space, red edged, that belongs to the applicant. And in the far right hand corner you can also see those are garages, and that is a garage also in the applicant's ownership. That's the front of the site, the northern side, so that's the communal door into that particular element of the block of flats. The application site is the ground floor flat on the right hand side there, so you can see the 3 front windows which serve each of the bedrooms. This is the HMO data count. Members are familiar with the policy, which is concerning balanced communities. Our policy, our guidance has a 50-metre radius shown there in red from the application premises, within which normally we would not expect more than 10% of the properties to be an HMO in order to maintain a balanced community. As the report sets out, there are currently no HMOs within that perimeter, that 50-metre radius. Approving this application would take that figure to 1.27%, well within your policy threshold. Also on that basis, partly on that basis and the configurations and location of the flat itself, there's not considered to be any undue amenity impact for neighbours adjoining the flat or in the wider block from the proposed dual use. There is the ground floor of the flat. So there's the front elevation, you can see the communal staircase, etc., and lift, and then moving into the flat, into the hallway, bedrooms 1, 2 and 3. The first bedroom, bedroom number 3, is next to a shared toilet. The master bedroom has its own ensuite. Then there is also a shared bathroom, a kitchen, and the lounge diner, which looks south over the marina past a internal balcony. These are photographs of the 3 bedrooms, and in the bottom right hand corner the ensuite for the master bedroom. There's the kitchen going clockwise, the lounge diner looking out across the marina, and then the shared bathroom Members will have seen from the report the room sizes all comply with your standards, and so there is no concern either about the occupation of the flat in terms of the amenity of the occupiers. The applicant states 3 people would be occupying the premises if approved, 1 in each bedroom. Of course, the Class C4 is for 3 to 6 people if granted living together. Otherwise, that is the long and short of the proposal and the main points outlined for you. With respect to the supplementary matters report, you'll see we've had 2 further letters to add to this significant number already concerning the error with the highways comments. That's been cleared up in the report for you. There was just a mistake on the access point from the road. A minor slip, that's been corrected. B, an objection did not appear online, that's been corrected. C, lack of flood risk assessment, as the SMAT report in front of you notes. This is a change from one type of residential use to another, so there's no effect to or from flooding matters from the proposal. And D, a complaint about the location of the site notice. That was displayed at the front of the premises near the communal doors, so we are satisfied that was the correct place. Otherwise, bike storage, the officer report notes in paragraph 521 it was speculating that bike storage could be achieved on the internal balcony you can see there, or the covered balcony, but the applicant has noted that's not allowed within the rules of the property, but of course the applicant has its separate garage, which is in a corner plot, so it has a splayed floor plan, so it's wider at the back and bigger than a normal garage. So we are assured there is space in there for bike parking, secure, weatherproof of course. So condition 3 would remain to secure that point. Thank you. So it's over to the Chair and the deputations.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to take the deputations. First of all, the people in favour, and if you could introduce yourself and keep to the time limits, then that will be very gratefully received.
Chair, the objectors go first.
I'm really sorry. I'd like to have the deputation objecting to the application with the same things said. Thank you. Introduce yourselves first.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is David Jump, and I'm the joint owner with my wife of 43 Oyster Quay. Thank you for allowing me to address you in this matter and to give some context and to challenge some of the findings in the report. From the outset, let me state for the record that I do not doubt the sincerity or integrity of the report or its author, but merely seek to highlight some of the real issues raised in it, which need further explanation. Firstly, on the question of previous HMO use. In the report at 114, it states that the property was used as a small HMO from 2009 to 2018, evidenced by tenancy agreements and tax records. I've got no way of verifying this, but the applicant's wife has publicly stated in an email to fellow leaseholders on the 12th of June that flat 155 has been used as an HMO since 2009 and had consistent MOD tenants in place for 9 years until 2018. The MOD do, of course, take on private tenancy agreements in order to house their personnel where suitable on-base accommodation is unavailable. However, the occupying service personnel assigned to such privately rented accommodation do not pay rent and have no security of tenure. The statutory definition of an HMO, set out in the Housing Act 2004, Section 254, it sets out a requirement that rent is payable in respect of those persons' occupation of the flat. Any rent payable by the MOD to the applicant would have been for securing the use of the flat for the purposes of the MOD, albeit residential. It would have not have been to pay for the occupier's right to occupy. The MOD letting would also fail the HMO definition because by subsection 2 and 3, the occupation must be as the occupier's only or main residence, which on its ordinary meaning clearly cannot apply to MOD service personnel in MOD property. So it seems that without further and convincing evidence to the contrary, the claim's 9 years of HMO use should therefore be discarded as a consideration. On the issue of parking, it's highly controversial at Oyster Key, and rightly so, as it's an essential amenity to living there. Due to the lack of transport and shops, you can't buy groceries at the boardwalk, for example. All residence parking is relatively secure within the Oyster Key estate. There's no available on-street parking anywhere in the vicinity, and the nearest public car parks are several hundred yards away. The report states at para 1.5 that the flat has dedicated off-street parking space as well as a large separate garage. But at 3.2 that no parking is proposed as part of this application. And further, that this proposal does not increase the parking requirement for the site, that is 155. That is to say, 1.5 vehicle spaces and 2 cycle spaces are required. With respect, it is self-evident that a parking requirement of 1.5 vehicle spaces cannot be met by providing no spaces at all. Further, there seems to be a conflation of requirement and demand in the Highways memo, which is reflected in the sentiments in the report. Clearly there will be a demand, as was confirmed by the report at para 520, where it states that a family with grown-up children each owning a separate vehicle could occupy. By apparently withholding parking facilities from his tenants, the applicant is putting the burden of providing his tenants with parking spaces onto neighbours and the estate management without compensation. The fact is that all parking spaces and garages are owned by flat owners and therefore not available for others to use. As an estate amenity, there are a limited number of visitor spaces some 300 yards away from 155, but they are under pressure from other residents and not available in any case for permanent use. Further pressure from spaceless tenants, perhaps in the future, will reduce the most important estate amenity to the detriment of all. Therefore, unless the applicant can meet the parking requirement from his available resources, his application would appear to fail. Bicycle storage has been mentioned just now. Stated to be on the ground floor balcony is unrealistic, and I understand from what has been said that that may have been reviewed. Balconies are neither secure nor weatherproof, and in any case they're not within the terms of lease. There's no social benefit to an HMO in Port Solent or in Oyster Key. According to the HMO SPD, the purpose of an HMO is to provide low-cost accommodation for the homeless and those on low incomes close to shops and public transport. Oyster Key can deliver none of those because it is too remote and high overheads make it too expensive to live in for the low-income bracket. If granted, this application will set a precedent for up to 12 other similar applications, resulting in perhaps 40 or more additional adult residents, which will overwhelm the existing parking arrangements and place additional uncompensated burdens on the estate service charges payable by all the other flat owners. Finally, there's a material local finance consideration. This is one of the relevant considerations for planning decisions under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, Section 70. But there is no mention of this or any consultation with the council, with the City Council as freeholder and head landlord of Oyster Key. The committee should consider consultation with the PCC because HMOs at Oyster Key will tend to reduce revenue to the PCC as the head rent payable to the Portsmouth City Council is a percentage of the value of all the flats in Oyster Key. There is also the possible issue of compensation referred to in the letter from Planning Base dated the 14th of January 2022. Whether a site visit is advisable is a matter for the committee, but I would recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chad, just before we go on to the next deputation, could I ask for some advice? The deputation has brought up the issue of the rent paid to the City Council by Oyster Keys, and that sits within my portfolio. It would seem to me, therefore, that there could be a suggestion that I would be influenced by that, and therefore maybe I need to declare an interest and leave at this point, but I'd like some advice.
I'll just give you some advice on the material consideration of local finances. First, because in dealing with a planning application, any local finances considerations are a material consideration. The matters that the gentleman is referring to are not material to this application in that sense.
Okay, so I'm safe to stay. Thanks for the advice.
Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, Chair.
If you could give your name.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to say that I'm Peter Edward Harrison. I'm a director and owner of Rovic Limited, the under-lessee, under-leaseholder of 46 Oyster Quay, Port Solent. Portsmouth City Council, which I'm referring to afterwards as PCC, is the superior landlord and freeholder. The Planning Department's report to committee on para 5.32 merely dismisses the property's lease terms imposed on all the leaseholders as not planning considerations. I would respectfully submit that this is not the case in this set of circumstances, where PCC would be liable to pay compensation which is addressed inter alia by the Law of Property Act 1925, section 84, bracket 1, bracket AA, and by case law, coupled with section 70, bracket 2, bracket B of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, which confirms the local planning authority should have regard to any local finance considerations so far as material to the application. There is no public evidence that the Planning Department has an understanding of the realities of the specific case, or that explicit consideration through consultation has been given by PCC, the unitary authority, to its position as the freeholder of 166 separate units and one service unit of the ring-fenced development of Oyster Quay. Thus, I request that the committee and its legal advisers give full consideration to the text of my objections dated the 29th of December 2022 and the content of my planning consultant's letter dated the 14th of January 22, which addresses the matter of compensation which will be determined by first-tier tribunal. May I add that were this application to be approved, it would place the management company owned by all the under-lease holders in an untenable position. It would not change the extant contractual rights and obligations set out in the head lease, and it could not be expected that the necessary majority of shareholders would support a significant change in general meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Juliette to give us the legal advice we need on this before we move on to the deputation in favour of the development.
The role of the council as the freeholder of the property is completely separate to the role of the council as local planning authority. It's not something that should be taken into consideration. In terms of the compensation side of things, it's not relevant to the planning considerations. And as I said earlier, the local financial considerations that can be taken into account, I'll just outline what they are for you, as I didn't say those earlier. So it would be a grant or other financial assistance that has been or will or could be provided to the relevant authority by a minister of the Crown, so something coming from central government. And the other one is obviously a sum which is a payment under CIL, so the Community Infrastructure Levy. None of those things mentioned are therefore local financial considerations for the purposes of determining the planning application.
For clarification, can I ask a further question then here? So if, regardless of what planning decision we make today, the objectors could and probably would take it up with the legal department here and look into the details of the lease, maybe a tribunal has to look at it or whatever. Is that the case?
I mean, it's a private law matter, so it's nothing to do with the planning application. Today we're here to consider the planning application and the grant of planning permission. Any matters between the council and the freeholder and the leaseholder, those are separate matters. They're not relevant to planning.
Chair, may I just add that there is case law on this subject, and although I'm not a lawyer, there is public QC advice on the subject, and although it is not every day that this occurs by any means, it specifically these cases deal with cases where the local authority is the freeholder or has been the freeholder. This is not a generalised situation, it is specific to the position of the council.
I've not come across this before, and I'm sure a number of us haven't either. We've got two possibilities. Either we go ahead knowing that and not knowing what the outcome would be, or we consider this as a separate planning application in isolation from those concerns, and then obviously recognise that other legal processes would take place to ascertain the details of that lease and that relationship there. What do we want to do here? This is unusual. Hugh. Councillor Mason.
I think that it is proper that we should adhere to the advice which we receive from our own legal department. If they are in any way remiss or at fault, that is a matter of law. We are a planning committee, and in following that remit, we have to take advice from our own legal consultants, our own legal section. And so if our legal advisor advises that it is safe to proceed, we should proceed.
Everybody else in agreement with that? Can I ask then, is it safe to proceed or should we defer?
My advice is that they're irrelevant considerations, so they're not relevant to the planning application, and you should carry on and determine the planning application. Any private law matters will be between the freeholder and the leaseholders. That's not a matter for the committee to consider.
Good morning. My name is Craig McGuinness. I'm a joint leaseholder of flat 155 Oyster Quay. As already been said, Oyster Quay is a development of 166 apartments within Port Solent Marina and its shopping and leisure boardwalk. The superior landlord, as we know, is Portsmouth City Council. The interim landlord and management company is Oyster Quay Management Limited, run by a board of directors who are leaseholders at Oyster Quay. I will refer to them where necessary as OQML. The HMO supplementary document dated October 2019 states, "It is essential that we work towards maintaining mixed and balanced communities in Portsmouth. Part of creating those communities is ensuring we have the right housing mix in order to both meet the demand for certain types of accommodation, as well as ensuring we do not have a saturation of any one type of accommodation in one location or community. Currently, in fact, there is no balance or housing mix at Oyster Quay, and it is often referred to as being one of Portsmouth's flagship luxury estates. So I ask the question today, who is this luxury estate for? The majority of single working people looking for housing cannot afford on their own to rent a luxury flat, but they just might, as professional sharers, and enjoy the lifestyle that so many residents at Oyster Quay appear keen to deny to ordinary working people. Discrimination, prejudice and ignorance should have no influence within planning. We find ourselves defending our rights over how our flat can be used and upholding what we have fought so hard to secure for not only us but all leaseholders on the estate. Our apartment has been rented since 2003 until 2018 with no complaints. It was rented to 3 unrelated sharers from the MOD by a highly regarded local rental agency under a single assured short-hold tenancy. Between 2018 and the present day, the flat has not been rented due to prolonged litigation concluding in April 21 with all parties signing up to a settlement agreement and court order. This very settlement letter was sent to all leaseholders at Oyster Quay and now to the Planning Committee, and an extract states, "It is agreed by both parties that the interpretation of household under the terms of the lease will not be restricted to a single family, but will include unrelated sharers within the permitted user clause, and the letting will be as a single assured short-hold tenancy. This definition will be available and applied to all owners within Oyster Quay. In simple terms, a 2-bedroom flat rented to 2 unrelated professional sharers is allowed under the lease. Planning permission not required. Our 3-bedroom flat rented to 3 unrelated professional sharers is too allowed under the lease, but planning for C4 is needed for the 3 sharers. That is the law, period. Nothing more complicated than that. Now for the elephant in the room. A significant number of leaseholders do not want rentals on the estate, even though there are about 40 rented flats currently at Oyster Quay. Unfortunately, we personally bear the weight of openly expressed hostility against us as landlords, which is evidenced during this planning process, which is unwarranted. Permitting mixed C3, C4 use is not the cherished loss of a flat capable of family living. Oyster Quay has never been designed for family living, more for accommodating downsizing wealthy couples. The lease regulations forbid child activity in the communal areas, and there are no provisions for children's play facilities. Oyster Quay is a block of flats with an unfenced walkway and working deep water marina on one side and an access road parking on the other side. Not a safe place for children. Addressing some objections directly, OQML signed up to the settlement agreement on behalf of all leaseholders, end of story. And personally, I have no time for procrastinations about breaching the lease, and they need to be dismissed. Parking. The parking at Oyster Quay is one of using allocated spaces and garages. And if you have an extra car, you park it in one of the visitor parking spaces, of which there are about 56. On a daily basis, we observe the circulation of second and third cars, sometimes, belonging to leaseholders, monopolising the visitor spaces in rotation. Yet, there is still room for parking. So Oyster Quay does have adequate parking, even if an overflow may go to the general park, sometimes at Portsmouth. There is a large store for domestic refuse and recycling bins provided on site. Rental tenants are referenced and subject to Schedule 4 clauses, the leases do's and don'ts, and given a copy. Oops, sorry. There is no construction or alteration involved in our application. Our flat is still as originally built on the builder's plans. Granting the proposed C3, C4 status to our flat does not create an imbalance in the community, as the percentage of HMOs is well below the limit of 10%, which we now understand from the report. In fact, it will go some way to redressing existing imbalances. It is our intention to let our flat with both its allocated parking space and garage. If my 2 adult children lived with me, the flat would have 3 cars and there would be no recourse. Yet leaseholders choose to object to 3 unrelated sharers renting my flat who are less likely to have 3 cars. Our experience shows tenants often choose where to live in order to avoid having the expense of owning a car by wanting to be close to work. Therefore, they will walk, cycle or use public transport in the main. Please note there is a huge demand at Oyster Quay for hospital staff from Queen Alexandra Hospital and again the MOD. To recap, all OQML directors signed up to a settlement letter agreed on behalf of all leaseholders. I have no time for their procrastinations and duplicity about our application breaching the lease from any leaseholder. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yourself?
before we go to members, I wonder if Simon may wish to... No, oh, sorry. To the next deputation, whether Simon wishes to come back on comments made by the deputation.
Yes, of course.
Good morning. I'm Wendy McGuinness. Further to my husband's deputation, who is strictly the applicant, I'd like to add 1 or 2 extra points on the lawful occupancy of the flat in question. The reality and the irony is that if we chose to be social landlords in Portsmouth, our flat would be exempt from these HMO planning regulations. Yet in practice, the use of the flat would be the same and not first have to go through the planning committee's scrutiny. Further, should we reside as owner occupiers, the flat can have 2 independent lodgers live with us as one household and also be exempt from HMO regulations, but the flat would be occupied by up to 4 adult people. We know that the number of residents as a family would also not need permissions. However, the law states that in order to keep our flat within the open market in the private rental sector, we have to comply with the planning regulations imposed. Further, we have to go through this expensive and time-consuming process of compliance with it. We can see no valid reason why this application cannot be approved. Unfortunately, the planning process and the terminology used within such applications to people unfamiliar with them suggests alterations to the flat are required and inevitable, which is not the case. The words house of multiple occupation also strike fear at the hearts of neighbours, immediately suggesting occupancy by unworthy individuals. This frequently held misconception raises unnecessary and unwelcome tensions, upset and disruption within the community, who largely simply do not understand the legal process. The applicants then become the target of those misconceptions, which is unfortunate, to say the least. As an example of such misconceptions, on the notice of meeting, page 23, the objection listed under letter N, which states the application is an attempt to circumnavigate the outcome of recent legal proceedings. Now, this could not be further from the truth. In fact, the reverse applies, in that this application seeks to endorse the outcome of recent legal proceedings, not to circumnavigate them. Such is the case, therefore, that we have fought so long for the rights of our flat at Oyster Quay. And that's all I would say.
Thank you. This is a difficult application, and I would draw your attention to paragraph 5 of the officer's report, because we are here to, as Julietta's advisors, to look at the question of planning permission rather than anything else at all. And whilst we're obviously sympathetic when personalities clash and there are difficulties and stresses and strains, that isn't as such a planning matter, nor is the matter of the lease or other arrangements. So I want to make sure that our discussion does limit itself to the planning application, would first of all I'd like to ask Simon if he wants to make any further comments. If not, we'll move on to questions, and I would really urge the committee to stick within the remit of this committee rather than going further with this.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points to come back on. Thank you to Juliet for the legal advice. We did seek legal advice prior to today with our planning solicitors as well. The advice the committee has received has been clear. The first objector referred to, disputed whether or not the property previously had a lawful HMO use. The report makes it clear, this is just for information, the previous C4 use. The application is from C3. So whether or not there was a previous lawful HMO use is irrelevant to the planning application in front of you. We're considering the change of use from a class C3 to C3, C4. The first objector said the application had no social merit and referred to the SPD, the supplementary planning document, noting the purpose is of HMOs are for low income people. If I can finish the quote, the contribution to HMOs to meeting Portsmouth's current and future housing need is recognised, particularly as a source of accommodation for people on low income and benefit payments, young professionals, students, and the growing number of one-person households. So it's not a narrow group or one particular group as suggested. There was a statement that this would set the precedent for a further 12 units in the block or the area if approved. Each application, of course, is dealt with on its own merits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So can I ask for questions from members, please? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. And can I ask through you to the applicant? So this application is for C3, C4, which allows up to 6 people living in a shared accommodation. But the applicant has said that they're looking for 3 people, each having their own room. And could I ask through you to them whether they would be happy with a condition that limits it to 3 occupants only?
That would be helpful. Just very briefly, if you can answer that.
If I can answer that, it's a very good question. I think the maximum we can have in the flat is 5. I think it's 4. So I would certainly agree to 4. But obviously we're applying for C4 status because, we don't want 6 people, but just because we have 3 people on an AST. A small HMO.
Can I defer now to Simon Turner, who will give us the technical answer to that question? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. As I mentioned at the outset, this matter it does appear of interest. The application is for a Class C4 use, although the applicants have specified their desire or intention to, if approved, to occupy. Have 3 occupiers, 1 in each bedroom. The Class C4 use is up to 6 occupiers. But in this particular instance, with the room sizes, they would fall short of the correct room size in bedroom 3. But really this matter would be controlled through the HMO licensing. If they applied for 5 people, since 2018 I think it is, a flat of up to 5 unrelated people living together as a household would require a licence. And as you know, the HMO licensing arm of the council has the same room standards as the planning SPD deliberately. So at that point, I suspect, wouldn't like to prejudge anything, 5 would be the maximum in any event. But in planning terms, we don't therefore have, my advice would be no reason to restrict the occupation beyond the C4 general class.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Mason.
I have read I think all of the letters which have come in objecting, and one of them, which is referred to in 4.2L, is concerns over sewerage waste and waste disposal. Is there any sewerage problem with these flats that might give us cause for concern?
Simon?
I'm not aware of that, Councillor, but I'd simply give the overall reply that the occupancy of a Class C4 premises compared to Class C3 is generally considered to be in the same ballpark. As I said, this is going to be between 3 and 5 likely if approved, and you could have a family of that number or greater or lesser in the same flat. So broadly speaking, I don't think there's any material difference in any load exerted on drainage.
Thank you. Councillor New.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really to get some clarification, because it's not mentioned in the report. With the ongoing issues around cladding on Oyster Quay, does that affect what we're doing here within the planning committee? Because this seems to be quite a fairly non-controversial, actually, I might say, planning application and request. I really don't see what the problem is. But I just wondered, because I am aware that there have been ongoing issues there, so I don't know which has affected the leaseholders unfairly, in my view, but I don't know whether that has any bearing on what we're doing here.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. We're talking about flooding.
Cladding.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's a technical question, really, for the officers.
Clarification of the rest of the world, that cladding. Simon?
No, Councillor, no, it's entirely separate.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I just want to ask if the POSOL have been aware of this application. They're a residence management company. It states here that if you buy a freehold property in Portsmouth, you automatically become a member of the POSOL. The POSL rules dictate that HMOs aren't allowed, and they will seek legal action against anyone who attempts to do one. Now, I'm guessing they've already got permission for the 3. However, are they aware that this will allow 3 to 6? And considering the application says 3, but the gentleman's just stated 4, that's obviously beyond the 3 that the rules state of the POSOL.
If I can say and get this checked by Juliet, I think that is not a planning matter. It's one of those legal things that we are not here to consider today ourselves. Is that right, Juliet?
Chair, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I just say something on that? We are not part of POSOL. Oyster Quay is a totally separate...
We're not really allowed to take further comments, and in any event, that's exactly what we have said. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Judith. Simon, does this application involve repurposing any rooms?
No, I don't believe so, Councillor.
No.
It's a straightforward reuse of the existing.
It's a 3-bedroom property at present. How many people? Is it a 3-bedroom 5-person property, a 3-bedroom 6-person property, or a 3-bedroom 3-person property? What is it at present? Do you know?
Well, I don't think it has any definition whether or not when it was applied for planning permission 20, 30 years ago, whenever it was, I wouldn't know at the time if it was specified as being, back in those days it may or may not have been specified with the number of rooms and the expected level of occupation, but there's no planning control over the current C3 occupation in terms of whether one person lives in there or a family of 8 or 9 live in there. There's no control on that.
Okay. The applicant talked about 2 parking spaces. Or the highways officers talk about 1.5 according to the SPD. Is that a minimum of 1.5 parking spaces, or is that the limit? Is that what people are after?
It's expected number. It's neither maximum or minimum as stated. It's expected number, and since for these smaller HMOs, it's the same as for a C3 flat as for a small HMO. So it's equivalent effectively. Okay. So they don't expect any difference, and since the parking on the site is available now for the C3 or could be available for C3, C4, that's why there's no objection from the highways authority.
I'm just wondering how you get half a vehicle in a parking space, that's all.
Well, it's just one of those worked from a bigger development. That's how it's sliced, I suppose, worked out as you come down to just the one.
So if the applicant says that it's 2 parking spaces at the development, it's 2 parking spaces at the development. Is that correct, Simon?
Yeah, if the scheme was being developed in the first place, a change of use, say, of the whole development, or when it was first constructed, if the parking was, say, 1.5 per flat, and you had 10 flats, then you'd have 15 parking spaces. But once you divide it backwards, that's when you end up with this a split. Right. But the main point is, Council, it's effectively neutral, because it's the same expected parking standards for the flat as existing or as a small HMO.
Okay, those are my questions, Judith.
Thank you. Russell?
Just to follow up on the parking. Is that parking, so I know we've got 1.5, but let's say 2 for argument's sake. Is that 2 exactly for 155, or is one of those a visitor's bay?
As I understand it, it's the parking bay belongs to the applicant and the garage belongs to the applicant, so they should be available for the occupiers
so that's
of the premises, however it's occupied.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fielding.
Just a quick question regarding bicycle storage, which seems to be something that I raise quite regularly. The application says that there has to be at least 2 spaces, but if we were to allow up to 6 persons under the planning application, surely that should be, isn't it normally 4? And also, if they're going to be in a garage, don't they have to be unrestricted to the occupants of the property, so there would have to be keys available for all individuals to access the bicycle storage?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The parking standards are based on numbers of bedrooms per either C4 or C3. So 2 to 3 bedrooms. So it's not, the parking standards work on bedrooms in this instance rather than occupiers. So for 2 or 3 bedrooms, whether it's C3 or C4, the number of long stay cycle parking spaces are 2. But that garage, I suspect, could easily accommodate a car and more than 2 bikes parking spaces, because it's on a corner, it's splayed. So you've got that extra triangle in the splay, and in a garage of decent height you can easily wall-mounted holders, that sort of thing. So I've no doubt you can get more than 2 bikes stored in that garage anyway, and clearly the occupiers would have a key each, I would imagine, so they can get in and out.
So if we're done with questions, members, we've got comments and moving towards a decision. Gerald.
Sorry, I do have a question. I have been vaguely wavering. Could I ask Mr. Turner, if this application was just across the border in Fareham, would the applicant need to make a planning application to have an HMO or not? My understanding is they don't have a policy like we do to restrict, and therefore anybody could do what people could just do this as they wished if it was over the border.
First of all, it's a hypothetical question, but and in any case, I don't know what Fairham's policy is.
In which case, I'm happy to tell you that we do have a policy that means that people have to ask for permission, and my understanding is that Fareham doesn't, and you can just do it if you want without asking anybody.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon-Jackson. Can we move to, you want to ask another question? So we're moving to comments and moving towards a decision. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Judith. I propose moving the officer recommendations with a condition that the number of people in the dwelling is restricted to 3, as per the comment in 1.10 of the report. As far as I can see, this has been a HMO. I know we're not meant to talk about litigation letters and stuff like that, but if that letter is true, then that has been a HMO and is a HMO. And so I'm, like Rob, I view this as really quite non-controversial. The space standards exceed our policies significantly. That doesn't always happen. This has been a HMO for years, and so, again, this is reverting to type. Some of the comments in here I struggle with, I have to say, in terms of impact. As far as the parking spaces are concerned, it meets our parking standards. That doesn't always happen. So as far as I can see, I can't see any reason to object to it. I understand the impact on amenity, particularly in such a tight area as this part of Port Solent, and that's why I'm asking that the condition is that it is restricted to 3 people.
Simon, given what you said about the nature of the use class, can we put a restriction on that, or should we just accept it that the application here has been made for single occupancy and use that as the basis for the work that licensing does and so forth?
Thank you. planning conditions have to meet several tests, one of them being necessary. As per my previous advice, there is no necessity to restrict the number to 3 because the application meets your space standards for up to 5 occupiers. So my advice is it's not necessary to have such a condition, and yeah, not necessary because I don't believe there'll be any harm from 4 or 5 people occupying the premises given the space standards that are good. It's a good sized flat. And in any event, as I said before, the HMO licensing will come into effect should they want 5 or more, and that matter will be controlled by the licence instead. So my advice would be, thank you, but would not necessary.
Are you still moving your recommendation if that's the case, Councillor Sanders?
Yes, I'm happy to, but will be guided by colleagues.
Okay. Would anybody be happy to second that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to second that, Chair. Thank you. And completely.
And we have a further comment from Councillor Mason. Sorry,
Well,
do you want to finish what you
I
said?
had comment as well, Chair.
Yes, please.
So, like Councillor Sanders said, I don't think it's controversial. I also agree with Councillor Sanders, quite right. I don't think that some of the things in the report that have been reported by people objecting are fair or valid. I think this is a non-controversial application. I think we spent far too long talking about it today. It's now nearly midday. It feels a bit ridiculous for what is actually sensible, and as the officers described. And so I'd be keen to support Councillor Sanders, but without any need to restrict this. I think that our processes in place, as Councillor Vernon Jackson has suggested, is more robust than other councils, and we should have faith in those systems.
So I have Councillor Mason and then Councillor Smith, I believe, or do you want to still comment, Councillor Mason?
Yes, I would agree with what Councillor New has said. This doesn't depart from our policy in any way. It doesn't exceed 10%. The conditions are not inadequate either in size or in quality. The matter of parking has been raised. There would appear to be adequate parking within 300 metres, and if we look at the precedents that we have, where we have been overturned on parking, I think especially of, say, the Merton Road, 2426 Merton Road, where there was fairly clearly inadequate parking, that is not considered by Her Majesty's Planning Inspectorate to be a material consideration. And so I think that we really have very little option but to say, yes, this is acceptable.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
I'd keep it very short, Chair. I would concur with Councillor New and Councillor Mason on this, definitely.
Is there any proposal? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
I'd like to formally second Councillor Sanders' proposal with the condition.
That's already been done.
Okay, fine. And I think, though, that we need to be honest with colleagues who've come here to put their views, that we see a lot of these applications for houses of multiple occupation. The planning system as it's set means that any applicant who gets turned down here locally has the power and the permission to go to appeal to Her Majesty's Inspector of Planning. And we know from bitter experience that turning things down here, where we have no planning reason to turn it down, just means that we're giving people false hope because we know that it'll get through at appeal, and that costs the council money, and that's your taxpayers' money and my taxpayers' money. And we shouldn't be in the business of saying to people, we're going to turn this down, knowing that it will be given planning permission on appeal. It is just raising false hopes from people. So we have absolutely no option in this case, because the planning law is absolutely clear, and therefore it seems to be we can't say no to this, even if people wanted to, because all the criteria that we set to limit HMOs, which doesn't exist in other places, but we do have really strict policies. All the policies to restrict HMOs have been passed here, and therefore we have no option but to grant planning permission in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I think taking a leaf out of Councillor New's indication, we really need to stick to the planning application in our discussions. Any proposals to refuse this application? No. So can we move to a vote? All those in favour of the...
Just come in before we go to the vote. The advice I would give on imposing a condition limiting the occupation to 3, the test that you need to apply, or is it's necessary, relevant to planning and to the development to be permitted, enforceable, precise, and it's got to be reasonable in all other aspects. I wouldn't consider it to be necessary or reasonable to impose a condition limiting the number to 3.
I'm sorry, Juliet. I thought that Councillor Sanders had taken the. I may have misunderstood. Do we? We have in front of us.
Sorry to interrupt, Jude. I'd actually said nothing.
Okay, fair enough.
But I said I would be guided by colleagues. Colleagues have been clear that they don't think that, so I'm happy, therefore, to propose the officer recommendation.
So what we have in front of us now is a proposal to follow the officer's recommendation.
In which case, I would then like to propose an amendment to that there is a limit of 4, as stated by the applicant, that they'd be happy with.
Is there a seconder for that, given the explanations we've had? 3.
So there clearly is a seconder.
Yeah, there is a seconder. Thank you.
But Councillor Sanders has put forward the motion of the officer's recommendation.
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that?
Yes, Councillor New. And then we have 3 people who would like to have an amendment, and that, by implicit, contains a proposal.
We need to consider Darren Sanders' motion first.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't think we can, because if Darren Sanders' proposal goes through, the amendment by nature falls. You therefore need to look at the amendment first before you go to substantive.
Can I take some legal advice on that?
No, it's a separate proposal here. In planning, it's a bit different. Darren Sanders' motion has been seconded by Robert New, so we need to consider that one first.
Okay, we'll take legal advice and go with that. Can you all put your hands up if you agree with the officer's recommendation?
Chair, could I just double check? Does that mean that we'll be voting on the amendment afterwards, either way, with this vote?
No, if the motion passes, there won't be another vote.
So legally I need to vote against the proposal if I want any vote to happen on the amendment. Is that correct?
Yeah, probably is.
Yes. I can't tell you how to vote on the first
motion.
No,
to get to the amendment,
how you vote on
but to get to the amendment, I need to vote to vote down the original proposal before we can get to the amendment.
It's not something we can comment on, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Can I ask for some advice? If we do that, if that does happen, can another proposal come back at this meeting?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. A proposal for what?
The application.
Yes. I don't think we can come back to...
You'll come back to the proposal that I've put second, even though it's an amendment to the first.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I thought you meant coming back again after that. So all those in favour of the proposal without amendment, put up their hands, please. Thank you. All those against? 4. And now we have the second motion, which is the proposal.
No, there's no
okay,
further motion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time from your deputations, and that concludes this item. Do feel free to stay if you want to. Can we move on to the next item then, please, which is item 2, 5 Burlington Road, Portsmouth. Simon.
Just before we get, can we do, just for the record, I think it's sensible, just the lawyers in the previous meetings have been stated what the decision of the committee is so that everybody watching can see, and I thought that was a really good and sensible thing to do so everybody's clear.
Thank you.
Chair, planning permission is granted for the first application in line with officer's recommendation.
Thank you.
That's very helpful.
Thank you. Item 2, 5 Burlington Road. Simon?
This is an application at 5 Burlington Road for a change of use, like the last application, from a dwelling house Class C to purposes falling within Class C3 dwelling houses or Class C4 house in multiple occupation. The application has come to the committee because of 19 objections set out in the report in front of you, and Councillor Swan also called it in for decision. There is also a supplementary matters update that I'll do in a moment. Sorry about the quality of the plan on the left-hand side, but that identifies the premises there in the middle of Portsea Island, and on the right-hand side a photograph, so you can get a feel of the back garden and the street and so on and the surroundings. Here is the property. Number 5 is the second one from the left, marked there in red. Here is the HMO data count. No HMOs were identified in the 50-metre radius. If planning permission is granted for this property to be a flexible C4, C3 use, the percentage will be 1.33, which is well within your 10% policy with respect to balanced communities, and also, as stated in the officer report, there was not considered to be any adverse effect on a more localised amenity for residents. With respect to the floor plans that are set out also in the committee report, the property would be extended also under permitted development. So the existing rear conservatory on the ground floor would be replaced with a properly built extension to building regulations with proper construction and insulation. And then a loft extension would be approved, built under permitted development, providing 2 more bedrooms in the roof. So the plans in front of you there come in the front door, and you have an ensuite bedroom, a downstairs WC. Then next to the stairs you've got a separate communal living room, and then at the rear with the proposed extension you have a kitchen diner shared community space, or communal space, sorry. Upstairs on the first floor, 3 bedrooms, each with their ensuite, and then in the extended loft, 2 bedrooms, each with their own ensuite. All the bedrooms meet your specified standards. The kitchen diner is at 22.5 square metres. That's the lower of the 2 standards we have. It's normally 34, but if it's smaller, or at 22.5 as this one is, and if all the bedrooms are 10 square metres or more, as you're now familiar, that means we can accept the lower size of the kitchen diner, so it meets your standards. And then on page 17/35 in that table there, that the bottom room, the living room, is labelled as not required. What we meant by that was it already meets the standards without the living room, but that is also proposed, therefore it's effectively an extra communal space beyond the required standards. So broadly speaking, there are no objections from the officers with respect to community balance, local amenity and the living conditions for the proposed occupiers. Bike parking could be achieved in the front yard and or in the back, and as such it's recommended for approval. There are 2 updates. The private sector housing, as you may have noticed in the report, their comments were pending. They've now arrived. They have no objection and simply note that based on the layout and room sizes it would require a licence separately. And then we have noticed that a new planning application has come in at 22 Burlington Road, which is within the 50-metre radius. That proposes a similar change of use to C4 or C3. That's within the 50-metre radius. While the application in front of you must be determined on its own merits and ahead of the other one, because this one is here, as it happens, even if the other one were approved later, the 2 together would produce 2.67%, still below the policy threshold. I'll just quickly show you a couple of another images. That's the rear elevation on the left hand side, showing to the top the rear roof extensions, and then on the ground floor the proposed permitted development rear extension, and there's the front view. There are the bedroom sizes and all room sizes I've taken you through. There's the front of property, and there is the back garden. That's the existing lean-to conservatory that will be replaced with the properly built, if I can put it that way, constructed rear extension. Otherwise, we have objections and a deputation, I believe, from a resident.
Thank you. We have we have a deputation. Welcome. Would you like to go ahead now?
Yeah, sure. Hello everyone, my name's Julie Banthorpe. I live in the house next door to this proposed HMO. I do feel what I have to say will be futile, as the developer told me 2 months ago that this was a done deal, and having heard what I've heard from the first one, there doesn't seem to be a lot of hope. However, this HMO is going to have a substantial impact on my life and well-being, so I'd like to voice my objections and concerns. When I first heard the house next door to me, where I have lived for the past 25 years, was being turned into a 6-bedroom HMO, my heart sank, filling me with anxiety and impacting my mental health. Myself and my neighbours are deeply concerned over the already atrocious lack of parking in our street and the surrounding area. This HMO has potential for 6 vehicles and a further 6 vehicles if the tenants, partners, friends stay over. This will lead to untold stress for myself, neighbours and the surrounding residents trying to find a parking space in an already overcrowded area. The developer said to me in his opinion the majority of HMO tenants do not own vehicles, but is he then going to vet potential tenants to see if they do own vehicles? Of course not. He doesn't know the stress of trying to park where you live, so why should he be concerned? These small family terraced houses are very old and should not be having the guts ripped out of them to build on large extensions and large loft conversions to squeeze in 6 glorified bedsits for maximum profit. I'm concerned about any damage the building work may cause to my house. I have already had to replace roof tiles that fell down when the builders went in next door and knocked down all the walls and chimney breasts, leaving me out of pocket for the cost of the repairs. The loft extension will mean another room overlooking me, reducing the lack of privacy when I am in my garden, which I am in a lot, as I find this helps with my mental health. This is not the same as someone overlooking me in their bedroom, as this will be a person's living space, so they will be looking out of their window a lot more, as they will be in their room a lot more. Putting 6 adult strangers in a house with small living space has the potential for arguments and antisocial behaviours. These tenants are just passing through, and they are very unlikely to take a vested interest in the property, the street or the wider community. The walls in these old houses are paper thin, so I'm dreading the noise from all the TVs and music etc. coming from 6 rooms. I know a family would make noise, but it's very unlikely it would be coming from 6 different rooms at the same time. With 6 people and their friends and partners staying over, coming and going at all hours of the day, it will feel as though I'm living next door to a mini hotel. Would anyone in this room like it? No. The value of my house would be decreased and I would find it harder to sell. And when I do, it would be for a substantially reduced price, as let's face it, who wants to buy a house next to an HMO unless it is at a reduced price? This is actually heartbreaking for me as an individual, as I have worked very hard, part of that time as a single parent, over the years to pay my mortgage and make some profit in my house. Burlington Road has always been a friendly, family-orientated road. These are lovely family homes with gardens, and that is how they should remain, as the family homes that Portsmouth so desperately needs. I'm asking you all today to please take on mine and my neighbours' concerns and objections, and please keep this house as it should be, a family home and a family-orientated street, not a soulless place filled with overcrowded rabbit hutches. There already is an HMO, as you've said, in our street, and there is, which incidentally does have 5 cars. We have another, as you've just said, waiting for planning. That's just 8 houses away from this one, let alone all the others in the surrounding streets. It feels to me as though families are being forced out and the demographic has been changed to single people living in what are going to be described as bedsit land. It's just sad for us and the future of our community. I know this is very technical, but it was just what I wanted to say coming from my heart. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much for a very concise and clear deputation. We're now going to move on to look at the...
Judith, we have, according to the list, Mr. Simon Hill to speak for the applicant. Is Mr. Hill around?
I'm so sorry. I thought you... Are you all for this one? I'm so sorry. So who would like to go next? The two of you? No, I thought that. Simon.
God, just set a timer, sorry. So we're seeking planning application for a change of use from Class C4 to C3 to C4, falling under Class C4 use for 6 bedrooms. Firstly, there's a slight discrepancy from the floor plan that was shown. It actually shows that a couple of the en-suites are very, very, very slightly, about 30 centimetres too small. We've updated the plans so that they're all more than compliant and they're all in excess of the minimum standards. That's for the en-suites. We don't have to provide en-suites, but we've chosen to. Firstly, I'd like to apologise, as I've had to come to 5 out of the last 6 of these planning meetings, so I'm sure many of you will have heard much of my deputation already. So, this property is owned by a Mr. Leaper. My business manages the process for investors. That's what we do professionally. We do that full time. My business is a small local business which is family owned and operated. We've invested heavily in our business from personal savings, particularly during the recent pandemic where we were personally liable for all sorts of costs associated with running this business. It affected my family directly and greatly, and as such it's an emotive subject for me. Firstly, in response to the objector, the only reason that I can foresee that tenants will be excluded from the local community would be because the neighbours choose to ostracise the tenants. Ultimately, they're young professionals that we're putting in these houses. There's no reason whatsoever that these young professionals need to be excluded or not be part of the local community. Our average tenancy is over 24 months, so in my opinion there'd be more than enough time for them to integrate with the local residents. Secondly, I must mention that we did attempt to consult the immediate neighbours. In fact, I personally knocked on the door of the lady who's objected and a number of the other neighbours either side during the application process. Sadly, one of the neighbours has suffered a personal tragedy since us purchasing the property, and as such, we have deliberately delayed the works in an attempt to accommodate her at a very difficult time for her. We're currently awaiting the party wall surveyor to resolve party wall agreements with the neighbours before commencing the works. After my deputation last month, I extended an offer to all the councillors present to attend any of our properties to see for themselves what we're doing. I'd like to take this opportunity to further extend this invitation to all councillors present. I think it's really important you see the standard of accommodation that we're offering for young people in this city. We also extend our invitation on many occasions to the neighbours to come and see some of our existing properties. We currently hold open days where we show residents that are local to any properties we're currently in application process to show existing operational HMOs as well as consulting tenants who are currently in tenancy, and nobody took up any of the offers to do so. I've also extended that offer to Councillor Swan on 3 occasions, and he hasn't attended any of the properties. I noticed he was the one who brought this forwards. I've lived in Portsmouth since my childhood, having been educated in the city. I've spent many happy years here watching the city evolve and improve. I've personally been involved in the HMOs since I was 21, which is the last 14 years. I bought my first HMO when I owned a local letting agency. I've completed the RICS accredited property planning and development degree, and I've owned a letting agency that specialised in HMOs for the last 7 years. I'm a member of many governing bodies and accreditation, and have many accreditations in HMO management. Indeed, I currently carry out consultancy work for other letting agencies around HMOs. I mention all of this to show you that our properties are well managed. All of our staff members are currently working towards or already qualified in letting management. We also offer mentoring to students on HMO conversions. We currently employ over 50 local subcontractors for conversion of the properties, and as such, the conversion of this property provides direct benefits to others within the city. Just this week, we had a housing licensing officer visit one of our properties, and they commented that very rarely does she see a property with all the paperwork in place where she has the confidence to pass the licensing on the first inspection without any recommendations for improvement, and in such a short visit, due to being completely satisfied. In terms of locality, there's only one HMO currently in Burlington Road, which is number 46, which actually falls outside of the 50-metre radius, which is the acid test. In fact, there are no other HMOs currently within the termination distance. Hence, our addition of one HMO would represent significantly fewer than the maximum 10% allowed. Indeed, a number of other properties have come up for sale in this road, and we have not purchased them because their layout wasn't suitable for HMO, for the HMO use that we want. So we are very selective about the properties that we purchase and what they need to look like. When we purchased 5 Burlington Road, it was extremely dilapidated and it was bought under auction conditions due to the state of it. It was available on the open market, so many other subsections of society were had the ability or opportunity to purchase the property, and nobody else chose to do so. I say this to demonstrate that we have given the opportunity for other people to purchase it. In this particular property, all 6 of the rooms are at least the size required by the planning policy, and the communal space, including the lounge, is well over 140% of the required space. Clearly, this means that the property is compliant with the space standards, and in my opinion represents a great opportunity to convert this property into an HMO. I noticed at the last planning meeting much of the concern was around parking. So in the weeks since the last meeting, we've conducted a thorough parking survey ourselves, and we haven't found there to be an issue of parking which would affect our use. We've also conducted a survey of the new tenants we've moved in the last 2 weeks. We've had 14 tenants move in, and only one of those tenants had a car. Again, I hope this shows the low quantity of our tenants who have cars. I also note that the expert who was consulted on transfer, which is the highways engineer, deemed that due to the scale of development, a parking survey wasn't required and it wasn't deemed to present a material impact on the locality. The works we're carrying out are all carried out under permitted development. Many of the objections are about the work. Ultimately, if we chose to carry out these works as a family home, we would not require any planning permission whatsoever. So the works do not require planning permission themselves. It's only the operation of the property as an HMO which requires planning permission. According to the last credible data set, Portsmouth has a 62% working age population with an average age of between 30 and 35, with a year-on-year increase in population for the last 18 years. Portsmouth currently is one of the most densely populated cities in Europe and enjoys an incredible reputation for its employment opportunities. Sadly, as councillors will be aware, there's a lack of supply for properties for young people in the private rental sector. There's currently 4,270 HMOs, and I would agree that many of them are unsuitable to be HMOs, which is why it's very important that properties like this, which exceed the space standards and are not in overpopulated areas of HMOs, are allowed to continue to be HMOs. We inspect the properties every week, and the communal areas are cleaned weekly. We have digital contact with the tenants 24 hours a day, and we use a maintenance system to report any maintenance issues. Our last completed development, other than the last 14 rooms, we let within an hour. In fact, we let 4 rooms last week on one day. I say this to demonstrate to you, but there is a huge need for the rooms that we are offering to the market. The location of this property has, in our experience and factually, an undersupply of properties for single occupation by young professionals. The benefit for the wider community of this property has to be considered. At the moment, if those 6 persons were to take a 1-bedroom apartment, that would be 6 properties off the market. By putting these persons in this property, there are 5 that are then available for families, couples, etc. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you consider our application favourably.
Thank you. Just to remind members that the paragraph 5 does guide us on what the determining issues for this planning application are, and we're tremendously reassured when we hear about good management of existing HMOs, but it's not something that we can take into account because the property, of course, could change hands tomorrow. Are there any questions about this application? Councillor Sanders? Councillor Mason?
Thank you. Firstly, how many bedrooms are there now?
Councillor, it's labelled as 3 bedrooms on the first floor.
So just 3 bedrooms. And has the applicant given you any indication as to how many people currently live there now?
I don't recall seeing that, Councillor.
Okay, that's fine. The other thing is the applicant said that all of the ensuite rooms, not just some of them, meet the space standards. That is not in the report and is not in the supplementary matters document. Is the applicant correct?
Our report sets out that they meet the standards at 2.7 actually.
Well, 5.11 of the report says that it's noted that some of the proposed en-suites would fall under the required standard as set out in the SPD. If this is about the en-suites, because some of the en-suites in the report do not meet our standards, but the applicant has said they do. Which one is correct?
Sorry, Councillor, I was just coming to that. Our position as the planning officers was that such a small discrepancy of 0.04 of a square metre is so small. It's a sort of measuring within the margins of error.
I understand, forgive me, Simon, I understand that is the officer point of view, but the applicant has now said that there is no need for there to be a problem because everything meets the space standards. Is the applicant correct? Has the applicant provided you with information on that?
No, I've just heard today what the applicant has said.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that, Simon. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you. I mean, presumably we have an option there of conditioning that if the applicant is sure that he has increased the size, then we could probably. We've only your word for it, so we'll. Councillor Mason.
The extension into the roof. One, the visibility of this. Are there other extensions into the roof in the immediate vicinity, or is this the first one? Secondly, there was the question raised by the objector of overlooking. Would you consider that the level of overlooking could be considered a nuisance? Because this is effectively a living bedroom, a living room and bedroom in the roof. So could you explain a little as to the adequacy of that for our requirements?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just having a look at the aerial photograph to see if there's any indication of any others in the area, but whether there are or not, this one we believe to be permitted development, so that matter is effectively out of our control. In terms of overlooking, this would be a personal point of view, and I haven't been in the neighbour's garden and so on, but I can show you on the plans, if they're able to come up. Thank you. So the room in question is on the right-hand side there. This is the permitted development loft extension. On the left-hand side, you've got an ensuite, so we would expect that to be frosted and so on, looking down the rear yard area, down between the rear wing, and then at the end of the rear wing, looking down the garden, there is that bedroom and a bedroom window. It's recessed compared to the existing first floor bedroom window you can see next to it in the middle image. As I say, it's down to perception. I would say that being slightly set back and at a higher level, the view down into the garden is rather acute, and they may struggle to see all parts of the garden. and those parts of the garden are already overlooked by other windows. So I don't think as a planning officer that I would make any material distinction or material harm in the difference between what's there existing and what is proposed, what would result as part of a permitted development.
And so I'm right in thinking that there is no window in the, as it were, the left-hand flank wall, either at the first floor level or in the new roof level.
That's right, as shown on the plans, and I have a feeling a side window on a roof extension anyway would be restricted in sill height or opening or
Thank you.
And you said this is permitted development. This, that's right. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Sanders.
Sorry again, Judith. Simon, yes, you say it's permitted development, but this committee has already refused a single-storey rear extension, which is being proposed. So what are the dimensions for this single-storey rear extension, as opposed to the last one that was refused?
Thank you, Councillor. What happens with what's called a prior approval submission, which is the one specified in 110 there, if there's no objection from any neighbours, it has its prior approval within a certain period. In this case, because there was an objection, the local planning authority can take it can make a decision on it and call it in effectively. And in this case, there was excessive depth for that one. That was 4.8 beyond the rear wall of the original house. I don't think we have a dimension on the new one, so I may have to take some advice on that distance so I can clearly answer your question, Councillor. Can I come back to you on that, please?
Of course.
Any further questions? George.
We heard from the applicant, it's been mentioned that supplementary plans were submitted showing that where the ensuite bathrooms fell short of our SPD. Are we not meant to see those prior to making any decision on that application if such plans do exist?
Sorry, Councillor, could you repeat that?
If the applicant has put in additional plans replacing the existing plans to the application and the report, should we not see those prior to making any decision on that application?
Would this be back to the en-suites question?
Yes.
I think, and this is a supposition, that because the discrepancy was so small, I think we'd struggle to see it on the plan, certainly at this scale. But basically, what is in front of us is what's proposed, and so if approved, that's what would be granted. But I'm not sure if there's been what the discrepancy is, if at all.
Chair, could I just add that the sizing is set out in paragraph 5.9 in the table, so the actual dimensions are set out there.
I was merely raising that it sounded as though there'd been some form of reconfiguration.
Yes, certainly the applicant did say that. Can you just answer that question very, very briefly?
Basically, a couple of the en-suites are 4 centimetres too small. If you look at the plan, you'll see that there's a void in a couple of the bathrooms where we moved one of the walls in order to make an angle for a toilet. By literally moving that wall back, that gives us about 40 centimetres, which means that all of the en-suites then meet the size. So we've just reconfigured one wall. I mean, it is literally 4 centimetres too small.
It is very difficult to see at that scale on these scale of plans. I understand that. Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Fielding? Thank you. Any further questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to comments and move towards a decision. John.
It was only one really. I think I probably know the answer to it, but it was around the local residents said about the noise. Is there anything that about TVs and is there anything that could be done about insulation to help with that?
Simon?
Thank you, Councillor. I understand that the HMO regulations require some degree of noise insulation. In planning terms, though, we don't have such a requirement because, broadly speaking, we see little distinction between the potential occupation of a dwelling house with one person or 6 or 8 people and an HMO, small HMO, up to 6 people. So the answer is not in planning terms, but there may well be other controls through the building regulations and or licensing.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. As with the previous application, it does not appear that there is any legal route that we have to be able to turn this application down. As we've heard in other areas around us, it wouldn't even come to the planning department, it would just happen. I know residents are very, very concerned about this, but the route that has to take to address that is through a change of the law, which would then give us power to do things. But the advice is absolutely clear that if we turn it down here, it'll be one on appeal, and therefore we're giving people false hope, and therefore I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Well, I'm not happy. I think we have no choice but to move the officer recommendation, even though it is with regret.
Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Smith. So I have a proposer and a seconder.
Chair, could I come back to Councillor Sanders, please?
Oh, yes.
And Chair, just on the previous applicant, I wanted to put a limit to the number of people. On this one, it's not necessary because the planning class is for 6 people only. There are 6 bedrooms, so it is covered in that way already.
Thank you. Simon.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. I've got the answer to your question. The prior approval application that was refused had an extension running an extra 4.8 metres away from the original back wall. This one is 3 metres, so it is less, and that's an important distinction from our point of view compared to the refused prior approval, and it sits pretty much on the footprint of the existing rear structure as well, so the change from the existing would not be so material that we felt we could recommend refusal on those grounds.
So just to confirm, Simon, the 3 metres height and the 2 metres height, the 2.8 metres height to the eaves were within permitted development rights anyway. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. We have a proposer and a seconder for following the officer's recommendation. Do we have any contrary proposals? Okay, Darren.
I'd like a condition added to this, which is that all of the rooms meet our space standards. This is apparently what the applicant has said is happening anyway, but I think one of the issues that we have as a committee is that we recognise the problems with HMOs. I mean, I have landlords come to me going, this committee is anti-HMO quite frequently. And I think one of the trends that I've picked up, is to make sure that space standards are satisfied if rooms are being repurposed. And I think that that's a sensible condition to add.
Okay, can I just take legal advice on that quickly?
We've got a motion on the table from Councillor Vernon Jackson, which is to move the officer's recommendation, which has been seconded by Councillor John Smith. Therefore, we should be voting on that first. Councillor Darren Sanders is putting forward a different proposal.
Okay, we need to see if there's a seconder for Darren's proposal first, and then proceed in the order that we've already had advice about. Is anybody seconding Councillor Sanders? Councillor Fielding? Okay. So we have 2 proposals, and we're going to deal with the first proposal first, which is that we accept the officer's recommendation, albeit, as Councillor Vernon Jackson said, with a somewhat heavy heart. So can I ask for all of those in favour of the application being approved as per the officer's recommendation? No, any abstentions?
planning permission is therefore granted in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Good, so you have your planning permission. Thank you very much. I'd like to move now on to item... We're leaving item 3 to the end of the meeting, and we're moving on now to item 4, which is the application for the moving of the World War II beach defence at Eastney Beach. And here we have supplementary matters, which gives the applicant 5 years to do this rather than... Sorry? The previous one, I'm so sorry. Okay. The tree, yes. Application to fell a tree in 1 St George's Court, 4 Hambrook Street, and we don't have any supplementary matters on that, I don't think. Yes, we do. No update. No supplementary matters. So, Simon, please, could you introduce this for us? And there are no... do we have a deputation on this? No. No, we have no deputations on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As part of the IT problems earlier, a couple of images have dropped out of this. I don't think it's essential, but I can get into them through another presentation if necessary. But I'll take you through this now. So 1 St George's Court in Hambrook Street, Southsea, it's an application to fell an Atlas cedar that has a tree protection order on it. Castle Road runs there from the northeast corner down to the southwest, so Southsea Common is just a couple of 100 metres further to the south. So the red dot marks the St George's Court, which is an L-shaped block. I'm having to describe this to you because I don't have the plan, it's on the separate presentation. The block is L-shaped, so above the word Hambrook Street, the block fronts onto Hambrook Street, and then it, looking to the left, it turns north, and in its rear garden you can see the cedar tree in question sitting there on the grassed area. So it is a... I don't think my cursor's working. Well, I may get the other image up in a moment if that helps. If you look at the car park just to the northwest of the red dot, you can see some cars, 2 or 3 cars right in the middle of the image there. There's a red car there. Just the immediate left or west of that there is, it's a large tree actually, that is the cedar tree in question. I'll show you a photograph of that in a moment. Remaining at its location, this is sheltered flats for retired service personnel. You've got Elm Street to the northeast, the co-op there, and then cutting through just to the north of the tree is a public footpath you can see. So the tree has good visibility in the public realm. There is the tree that's looking from the public walkway. You can see in front of you between the larger brick and fence and the brick wall, the lower brick wall. That's a public walkway. So that is a tree. It's not sure of its age. The development is about 40 years old. The tree would appear to be that age or more probably. It's about 11 metres tall, which is about the same height as the existing structure. The applicant has applied to remove it because of branches breaking off. They said 3 times in a recent period, and they would like to replace it. The tree is indeed susceptible to damage. Now, if you think on Southsea Common or on the cliffs in Cornwall or Devon, you can all see trees that are in the prevailing wind, strong prevailing winds, and they are bent over to some degree because of that constant prevailing wind, and they lay down wood and grow in that position, and they are more streamlined to let the wind pass them. So they are accustomed to their conditions, and when there are stronger wind conditions, they are better able to withstand them. This tree here, as you can see, is protected from the prevailing winds by the building itself. So this is looking southwest, so the winds would come towards the viewer in this instance. So on a day-to-day basis, the tree is largely protected from the prevailing winds by the building itself. But in storm conditions, you can get a vortexing and whirling of the wind over and down behind the block, and that starts to interfere with the tree that hasn't grown accustomed to those high gusts because they're so infrequent. And that is where we're getting the damage occurring. And it's not a good idea to have elements of a tree falling off before or after a storm for residents. The tree doesn't regenerate well, and it would have to be, as it's continuing to grow taller and closer to the flats, the problem will become worse. So it is regrettable to see a tree go, but that is the opinion of the tree officer, that it does regrettably need to go because of its dominance and the problems of not being able to withstand damage and the lack of regeneration. Moving on more positively to the proposed replacement tree, of course. As you'll see from the conditions, that's to be a strawberry tree, the Killarney strawberry tree. Used to be native, but it's retreated to the Mediterranean basin mostly now, but there is a last stand in the south of Ireland, hence the name. And there is a strawberry tree on the seafront down in the rock gardens. So it can grow and thrive in this area. That would be an extra heavy standard. That means about 4 metres tall going in. So it goes into a good standard, immediate amenity, and it would grow to 8 or more metres in height and width, a much more appropriate size for the space available, and it would never grow high enough to be so subject to the winds vortexing over on storms. The tree is very attractive, a strawberry tree. It's evergreen, so it has all-round foliage. It has rather lovely bell flowers in the autumn, attractive to bees for late pollen and nectar in the season, and it has the fruit that grow throughout the year, maturing in the autumn, a lovely orangey red colour. They are edible, but it's more the birds who like them. I do have an image of that on a separate presentation if you would like to see the proposed tree. Nodding heads. Okay, if you bear with me, please. Hopefully it will work. There you are. There you are, Councillor Byrne-Jackson. There is a clear image of the location of the tree, without so many descriptive words from me. There is a strawberry tree. That's fairly mature looking. It'd be 5 or 6 metres tall, I'd say. So it's an attractive tree, although much smaller than the cedar, more appropriate size for that space. And there's the green foliage I mentioned, evergreen, and there are the flowers and the fruit. So that is the proposed replacement that would go in. We do have a number of objections, but the tree officer, I've summarised his thoughts on it essentially. So that is the proposal to replace it with a better, more appropriate specimen.
Thank you, Simon. There being no deputations on this one, we can move straight to questions. We do have here the arboriculturalist recommendation. I mean, I think all of us don't want to see a tree going down, but questions from members? Councillor Byrne-Jackson.
Simon, the concern is about whether, if the tree came down, can you confirm that with the prevailing winds, the tree would fall away from the building, which is what the map showed?
Gosh, I have no expertise in tree felling and what may happen. But
tree felling.
Falling. Yeah, how a tree falls. I really wouldn't like to say, but I would have thought there's quite a high risk of it not falling in the way you might want it to.
But if the winds are prevailing, and if you go up onto your slide, Simon, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. Yeah, there we are. So you've got the prevailing wind coming from the southwest with your large arrow. You have the building between it and the tree, and on the other side of the tree, following the direction of that arrow, is open. Is not the building. Is that correct?
I think paragraph 5.5 addresses this from the arboriculturalist.
Yeah, but okay.
Yeah. We haven't been told that there's a particular risk of the tree as a whole failing. It's more damage to individual tree boughs and branches. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. But clearly, the advice is as a whole, it's a bit difficult and it's going to get worse. Hence the proposal to replace it.
Question from you, Councillor Sanders.
Just two questions, Judith. Firstly, in 4.1, you talk about the previous loss of, somebody talks about the previous loss of limbs. I'm assuming these are limbs of the tree that have been falling off as opposed to limbs of humans. Am I correct in this?
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor.
All others are available. Is that right? We're talking about the tree,
yes.
Tree branches coming off, basically, aren't we?
Thank
Okay, secondly, there's a support comment, the same support comment, which talks about danger to residents. What sort of dangers did that comment identify?
I don't know if it was that. Obviously, we summarise all the comments, so I don't know whether or not there was anything more specific in that. I haven't read that particular comment. So I don't know, Councillor, but okay. I think it's the danger of, in particular, any failing branches that falling down, as I say, either during a storm or as likely afterwards when people are out and about again.
But your recollection is this hasn't happened at the moment, but there are some residents in the block who think it might.
The applicant has said it has happened 3 times, and there's a photograph that part of the IT glitch hasn't appeared, but there's a photograph of one of the where a branch is broken off.
And has harmed the residents?
I don't believe there's any harm. That's not been told to us, to residents, as yet.
Thankfully not.
That's what I was trying to deduce.
Councillor Mason.
I can see a good reason for the removal of this tree, but why are we not replacing like with like? Why are we not replacing a cedar with a cedar? Why are we replacing a cedar with what appears to be a strawberry tree, according to the recommendation 3?
And Councillor, not a tree expert, I dare say there are different types of cedars, well there are. I have a feeling most of them would grow too tall and present us with the same problems down the line. So, I mean, clearly the tree officer thinks carefully about exactly what tree. I do recall that perhaps sometimes more than one option is given. In this case, though, clearly our colleague does believe this is an appropriate tree for this location and the soil type, etc., etc. So yeah, I think another cedar would just be too big.
Councillor Jeffries.
Could I just ask, I'm not an expert in TPOs, so if the consent was given and the new tree was put in as part of that, would the new tree have a TPO on it, or was it only certain trees that would have TPOs?
I believe it would become part of the TPO. I think the TPO would have to be formally updated and amended to reflect the new position. That's my understanding.
Can we move then to, if there are no further questions, can we move to, do you have another question, Councillor?
No, but I'd like to propose refusal for this, please. On the grounds of significant loss of amenity, a well-loved tree, it's clearly in a significant space, and that the prevailing winds would take it away from the building if it did come down. When tree preservation orders are meant to be preserving trees, that's our job, and therefore I'd like to propose that we do that, do our job and preserve this tree, and therefore refuse permission to take it down.
Understood. Are there any
I'll second that.
Second that.
I'll second that.
Okay. Councillor Fielding.
I'd like to propose we go via the officer's recommendations.
Okay.
And I'd like to make comments as well, if possible.
Would you like to comment then as well?
Yeah, I think it's, as has been stated here, it's the wrong tree in the wrong place. A cedar tree is a substantial tree, and whilst it's a great loss that we're not going to have that same canopy there, if we're getting a suitable tree as a replacement, then I would believe that's the best way forward to avoid any incidents that may occur through loss of tree limbs.
There's also, of course, the potential loss of life and limb, isn't there, which we would need to take into account. John.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second that proposal, and I was waiting to come in with just a comment, really, which was I think it summarises the outcome in 5.3, which is the size of the tree, 30 to 35 metres high, a trunk of 1.5 to 2 metres, and a spread of about 10 to 13 metres. I think that says all it needs to be said, really, about it. And it does say in there as well, it is regrettable, because it is regrettable. Nobody wants to lose a tree, but a more sensible size of tree would be correct in this event.
Okay, so my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong please, that we move first to look at the proposal from Councillor Vernon Jackson. We would need, I think, to have a bit of a discussion about what reasons you're giving for refusal.
Because there's a tree preservation order which is meant to preserve trees, as is in the title, and the tree preservation order is clear. It's about the amenity as well. It's a well-loved tree in a good space with lots of area around it. So it is it is a high amenity tree.
Okay, so if we come to
Chair, can we go to Simon first for comments on what's being proposed, and then I may wish to come in after Simon.
Okay, Simon.
Thank you. I think the council has to be a little bit careful about forcing an owner to retain a dangerous tree. So there is some danger already from branches breaking off, and we believe that danger will become worse as the tree grows yet taller and is more susceptible as it grows above the building to strong winds. And we have to be careful about liability as well. So of course the loss of amenity of a tree is unfortunate, but we believe a better replacement, as I've said, provides new good amenity, and that's going to be long lasting and appropriate for that particular site.
Can I come in, please, Chair? Thank you. Under the legislation, where there's a tree which is protected under a tree preservation order, people can make an application to do works for that tree, which is what this person has applied to do now. So the issue we also have to consider is compensation. If we don't grant permission and there are issues and it leads to compensation, the council will have to pay compensation.
Chair, I'm sorry, this is not an application to do works, this is an application to chop down and remove. This is not trying to take a limb off or whatever, and and you do get applications for that, and they're often very sensible. If we're saying here, as appears to be the advice, that any tree that might at any point in any hurricane lose any limb must therefore be chopped down because there might be some possibility of compensation paid in some theoretical case, then that is an order to chop down every protected tree in the city, because it gives an absolute green light to any owner to come back to say, well, if you don't let me chop down this tree, I'm going to, and something happens if there is a hurricane, that is ludicrous. You might as well just get rid of any tree preservation orders at all. So I'm sorry, I am absolutely now clear that we need to preserve this tree. Thank you for the legal advice to reinforce that. And I think this is a very high amenity tree that we need to be protecting. Otherwise, we're not doing our jobs.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask Simon Turner to come in, but also just remind you that we have advice from a qualified arboriculturalist here, not just the views of the...
Who regularly tells us to chop down trees.
Simon?
Thank you. It's a subjective matter as to the amenity of the tree. Of course, any tree has an amenity. This tree, if you want to be fussy, perhaps, its amenity is reducing, as you can see from the photograph. It's had, that's where the branch was broken off on the right-hand side, and you can discern a bit of a gap around about the roof height. And so it's starting to lose some of its amenity if you're talking about the balance and appearance and of an overall tree. And that's likely to increase as it grows closer to the windows. It had to be cut off, and then the other side away from the windows would continue to grow. So you start to get an asymmetrical, lopsided looking tree. And then any pruning after any limb removal or limb branches breaking off. So it's starting to have its amenity affected already. But the important distinction, I think, with we do get plenty of applications to remove trees, and the tree officer will consider on the grounds of purported danger stated by the applicant, and the tree officer will go and visit. And if the tree officer says, well, no, this is a strong tree, and its particular circumstances don't mean it's susceptible to damage, it's not rotted, or it's not close to a public footpath or property, then we will say no, it needs to be retained. And I've seen those decisions and refusals. In this instance, there is some danger, and that danger is going to get worse. Hence, in this instance, it's regrettable, but the amenity value is not so high, and there is some danger now and into the future. Hence the recommendation to allow the application.
So we have in front of us the first thing we need to consider.
Yeah, could I ask Simon Turner a question through you?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, would you not agree with me that as this tree grows, the amenity value is not just to this block, but to the surrounding area, and the objections come from people in the surrounding houses? As this tree grows, the amenity value of it will be increased because it is being seen by more people. Therefore, the amenity value of it inevitably must increase.
I'm not sure about that, because it's already very visible as it is. So if you're walking down Castle Road, I don't think you'll see it until you get round the corner, and then you'll see it now, or whether it's got another 5 or 10 metres on it. But as I say, the amenity value, the form is already slightly lopsided, and that is highly likely to get worse for the reasons I've explained. So yeah, I don't think that as the tree grows, its amenity would particularly increase, because it's already a large tree.
Councillor Jackson, we got in your proposal, which has been seconded by Russell over there, will be the first thing we consider now. So would you like to raise your hands if you're in favour of Councillor Jackson's proposal to refuse the permission and the reasons he's given? Anybody in favour of refusing, please raise your hands. Okay, looks like those against. Any abstentions?
Consent has been refused.
Chair, could we have a very clear reason, just to make sure we've understood it properly?
We have agreed the outline reasons, but if you could...
As stated in my comments earlier.
Yes.
But for simplicity, Simon, loss of amenity, it's a wonderful amenity tree, and it would be a disaster if it was chopped down.
Thank you very much. Let's move then on to item 5, which I introduced before erroneously, which is the World War II beach defence.
Chair, my apologies, I need to disappear. I'll be back as soon as I can.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm sure the planning officers will be relieved I've gone.
No, come back please and finish off the agenda. That's great. Simon.
Just to confirm, Darren Saunders has left the room.
Hmm?
Just to confirm, Councillor Darren Saunders has left the room for this item.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
I mean, do assume that we have read the report, so we can go through.
Thank you. Okay, this is an application at Eastney Beach for concerning the World War II beach defences, or the tank traps. It's a listed building consent application for the removal and then reinstatement of anti-tank defences, which would facilitate, in turn, new coastal defence and coastal path works. The application is coming to the committee because of 5 letters of objection. Eastney Beach is at the far eastern end of Portsea Island, the seafront onto the Solent, just before you get to Langston Harbour, the mouth of the harbour, which is just off to the east, to the right there. So from left to right, we've got the caravan holiday park. You can make out with the different structures there. There's a public footpath along its eastern boundary down to the beach, or you can get to the beach from further west. Then the Fraser Range former MOD facility is there in the middle with some large older buildings. And then to the northeast, you've got Fort Cumberland, the Scheduled Ancient Monument and listed building. Members may be aware that there was a planning application to redevelop the former Fraser Range site, that site in the middle there. and this is the reason for the application, because it's for residential development. That's still with us. We hope it may come to the committee later this year. If that application is approved and residential development goes ahead on the site, because of the new residential use introduced, there is a need for commensurate coastal defences and the coastal path, as I've mentioned. Hence this listed building application. However, the application before you today, to be very clear, is independent of that Fraser Range redevelopment application, and approving or refusing the application today would have no bearing on the determination of the other redevelopment application. In a bit more detail, there on the left is the footpath taking you down to the beach from Cumberland Road area and the car park there, and you can start to see the tank traps, which are 1 metre cubes effectively that sit on the beach. So they were put there in the summer of 1940, one of the first of the coastal defence defence measures put in during the war, the Second World War, part of a suite of other measures, pillboxes, bunkers, that sort of thing. In this location, clearly it was deemed appropriate to have the tank traps. They've been there for 80 odd years and move around. We believe that probably was in a reasonably straight line. You can see them dotted to and fro, and they will move with high tides and storms. And so on the beach today, you can actually often see considerably less than what you can notice here. Here they're every 2 or 3 metres, it would appear. But in some other photographs that I hope come up, here we are. So the photograph below, you struggle to see many of them. In the far distance in front of the main building, you can see a collection, but then there are quite big gaps. That's probably because those ones have sunk into the beach, into the shingle, as opposed to being removed altogether. And the more detailed photograph on the left shows the variety of appearance and weathering that can be seen, and indeed whether or not they're sunk in or turned at an angle and so on. Moving back to this diagram, the applicant has identified 33 of the blocks that would need to be removed in order to allow the sea defences to be constructed, and then they will be reinstated. Obviously a lot of important details about the mechanism for identification, removal, storage and return, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Well, I mean that is really the key point. The applicants have researched the development. The Council for British Archaeology had some concerns as set out in the report about the amount of research done and the question mark of whether or not that the tank traps are proposed to return to their original position, if it's known, or the current position, which of course changes with each storm for each individual block to a greater or lesser extent. The applicant has confirmed they would be happy to replace them from the existing locations, which is what the Council of British Archaeology appears to favour, and indeed our Heritage Advisor on balance favours as well. Just to clear up that particular point. There is a submitted method statement which I think is pretty good quality and comprehensive, anticipating the sorts of matters that need to be considered for the care and reinstatement of the tank traps, which centres around, it's on the top of page 34/52, it centres on the obvious things you might think of thorough recording of the position and location and rotation, degree of submergence, etc. of all the blocks, their condition, how to carefully move them by hand with excavation, with something pushing them to get underneath, to get the geotextile membrane underneath, and then mechanical moving. Where to move them to is important. That's not yet concluded, but will be controlled by condition. How to store them, and then how to reinstate them, as I said before, back in the current or last positions, and decisions on one that was 90% submerged, do you return it to its 90% submerged condition as well as the exact same position, location. So these things are being openly and frankly raised as issues that we all need to consider, and will be controlled in more detail in the method statement that we propose to augment while it has made a decent submission, I think there are nevertheless further details we'd like to understand and therefore agree and tie down to make sure it's all done in the correct way and with minimal damage, and concerning the reinstatement. So that's what is proposed in condition 4, not only in compliance with the method statement, but an augmented method statement with more details, which we do believe is important. Condition 3 makes it clear that we won't allow, if approved, the movement of the tank traps until and unless the residential development is consented, which is some way down the tracks, a decision on that. We don't want to disturb the listed structures unless it's necessary, and I'm sure the applicant wouldn't want to either. Otherwise, hopefully that's taken you through at a trot. On the supplementary matters, just 2 minor points. We gave a 3-year recommended standard implementation period. Upon reflection, we thought it might be more sensible to have 5. Lots of complexities around the site, including the complexities of the method statement, whether or not the Fraser Range development gets consent, and that's a complex development, how long that takes to come forward, the sea defences, etc., etc. So we thought a 5-year consent, if granted, might be helpful and might avoid having to see it again rather than the 3-year consent. And then just the deletion of the last few words in the reason as being unnecessary. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have any deputations? No. So I can move on to questions, please.
Thank you. Just going back to the plan of the ones that would be replaced, am I right in assuming that actually not all of them would be removed?
That's right, Councillor. There are, as the report says, approximately 280 across the wider beach. They only want to remove and then reinstate the ones that they need to, obviously, and it's about 33 of them as labelled in blue there.
Just to follow that up, because obviously the main consideration is the heritage impact, and I always think it's nice that we don't tend to remove all the things that have so much history, but the fact that there are some there, it is nice that we've got there as some form of, I want to say remembrance. I know that's not a question, it's more of a comment, but I just thought I'd put that there.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Any further questions? Councillor Smith?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Has the redevelopment of the Fraser Range had any bearing on the move of the blocks? And I've got a second question.
Not the proposal itself, but as a corollary, or as a result of it, as I say, introducing residential development where there is none at the moment on the seafront would, as a result, require some sea defences to go in the area identified. So hence the need to take the tank traps to one side, put in those sea defences and then return them.
Thank you.
And sorry, I've got a follow-up question there. You talked about method statement to be agreed and understood, and you're talking about a 3 to 5 year plan. Will that give the opportunity then for people to change the repositioning of those blocks later on, as the method statement might require it because the redevelopment comes along?
There might be more than one phase of moving them, but there'll be one permission, and then once so longer term the answer is no. You know, they've got these 33 they would like to take away and put back in place, and once that is finished, that's it. If in another few years' time, or they think they want to move the same ones or some different ones, you'd need a new listed building application at that point.
If there are no further questions, then I'll move to comment and recommendation. Councillor Mason.
Madam Chairman, sooner or later the Fraser Ranges will be developed for housing. Sooner or later, therefore, we will need new sea defences. Sooner or later, therefore, we will need to move these blocks one way or another for a temporary period in order to facilitate the sea defence works. I therefore propose the officer's recommendation.
I'll second that.
please, no later than 10. So the live stream is on and we're reconvening this planning meeting, and we're going to move to item 6, which is Tideways, Tower Street, Portsmouth, and we will turn first, as usual, to the officer to report. Again, assume we have read this report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the application is at the property called Tideways, residential property on Tower Street, Old Portsmouth. It's a long development description in the report, but it's extensions and extensive alterations that I'll take you through. The location plan has dropped out as part of the IT problems, but you can see the site marked with the red dot there. So that is Tower Street that runs north-south. That is Broad Street. There's the northern element of the hot walls and the round towers just there. So hopefully that's located everyone. The property fronts onto the narrow Tower Street, and backs on with its garage to Broad Street. I'll show you that elevation as well in a moment. To the south it has some other houses. The one to the south is a bit taller, I'll show you in a moment. To the north is Spice Island House, a more modern 6 or 7 story flatted block. That is Spice Island House just there on the left hand side. A more modern flatted block in a yellower brick. Tideways, the application site, is the one in the middle with the blue door there, and then there are further 2 houses, numbers 1 and 3, going along the narrow Tower Street, as you can see there. So the application property, I believe, is from the 1930s. It's a red-brown brick, fairly close to the neighbour in colour and texture. It has the first floor oriel window there with the tile hanging, and then the top floor with the again this overhang and the dormer windows and tile hanging. The second photograph shows the rear image that you can see standing from the street in Broad Street there. So that is the application property, with the balustrade as existing. So you can see it's slightly lower. It's 1 story lower than number 1 Tower Street and 2 or more stories lower than Spice Island House. So there's a gap there. That is its garage, quite a large structure there, fronting onto Broad Street. It's hard to get photographs because the street is so narrow. The existing images, well, I won't hang around on those. They're a repetition, if you like, of what you've just seen in the photographs. This is the proposal. So the application proposes on the front elevation a new top story. So I mentioned before that Tideways is currently 3 stories, and next door has 4 to the right hand side, number 1. So the proposal is to build a new top story, and on top of that to have a glass balustrade and a roof terrace, which so many properties do have down in Old Portsmouth, including next door. So with respect to scale and street scene, this would match up to the neighbour, hence there being no objection from the officers. I should have mentioned at the start the applications come to committee because there are 5 objections from some local residents. Numbers 1 and number 3 have written in saying they have no objections, so the objections are mostly from Spice Island House, I think, and other places beyond. So the proposed first top story roof addition, and then the terrace on top, and then its alterations to the front elevation. So from the previous photograph you'll have seen the arrangement. The proposal is to remove the overhang tile hung effect at second story and have a flatter elevation with a new fenestration and a replacement oriel overhang window at first floor, and to take out the 2 ground floor windows and have 1 new window. And this would all be faced in brickwork, retaining the parts of brick that are there and can be retained, and then matching that very carefully, of course, with the conservation officer in terms of new bricks, mortar, striking and colour and so on, to make up the rest of the new elevation. To the rear, You've got two images, one without the, just showing the back of the property, and then one as you'd see from Broad Street, including the garage. So the garage would be reconfigured, slightly taller, new doors, and a pedestrian door, generally smartened up. There's no concerns about that. The recladding of the elevation in brick, or reusing the current brick, retained bricks and new bricks, and the fenestration, grey aluminium windows, and there's the back of the proposed top story and the balustrade to the roof terrace. And then this is the rear extension. I'll show you the footprint in a moment. It's a limited footprint, but the full 4 stories, because it contains a lift. So that is the rear extension, limited size, and at first floor you can see again limited depth, and the corner is cut off deliberately. It's splayed to reduce the impact upon the occupiers of Spice Island House, particularly in terms of the nearest window on the rear. And then each story thereafter, and that is the new upper story. So officers are happy to recommend it for approval. You may have noticed in the report there was a refusal earlier this year. That was for a rather different scheme. That scheme had new fenestration similar to this one, but that was the secondary concern of the planning authority. Those windows we understand more about, their details now, their quality, and there have been some amendments to their design and improvements, I should add. So that has alleviated that concern from officers' point of view, but the principal change was the refused application was to clad the building in render, and we just felt that that was entirely inappropriate in principle, considering the entire change of character to the building and the fact that the other buildings to either side are in masonry, particularly number 1 to the right, in more or less matching masonry. So the application, as I said, has come in to retain the areas of brickwork it can retain, where there aren't new windows and so on, and have new carefully matched brickwork to make sure that the overall character, of course, of the property is appropriate and pleasing. So the brickwork now would retain that heritage feel of the building, but it would have a modern twist, which is common in the conservation area, of smart windows. So a contemporary feel in some ways set within the more traditional heritage feel of the retained and matching brickwork. And then the top story would have tile hanging, again, to match the current building and the neighbours, so we feel that's an appropriate material. So on that basis, we're happy to recommend approval for you today.
Thank you. My name is Eve Kelly. Thank you for hearing my deputation. We moved from our family home of 25 years to Tideways in November 2020 and want to make it our long-term family home. We were excited by the sea views and the beautiful historic area. However, Tideways was very tatty and required a great deal of refurbishment. It had sat empty for over 3 years and had nothing done to it for many decades. Our aim is to significantly upgrade the house and in doing so play a small part in improving this unique area. It should be noted that the proposals would significantly improve the environmental credentials of Tideways. Spice Island is characterised by its variety of architectural styles. There are many different external materials and heights of buildings vary. Opposite us is Boom Tower and adjacent but one is Periscope House, all quite distinct in their design and material. As you saw, Tideways sits between Spice Island House and number 1 Tower Street and looks stubby and ugly between these buildings. We think that were this plan to be approved by yourselves, the finished Tideways would look much better and add to the interest and diversity of Spice Island. We've been working on getting a planning application approved since March 2021. We applied for a step-back upward extension, stepping back from the line of Spice Island House so that we do not impact on their views or privacy from the front. We also put in a planning to increase the extension at the back from 2 stories to 4 stories. It's a small extension measuring 3 meters wide by 1 meter deep and this would allow us to put in a compact lift of 1 metre square. My 85-year-old dad is unwell and likely needs to come and live with us, and having a lift would be a requirement for that. It also future-proofs us, enabling us to live in tideways for many years to come. We paid a lot of attention to the points brought up by the planning department and by those in the area who had raised objections to the plan, and so altered the plans accordingly. As you saw, we essentially cut off a triangle at the back extension to try and ameliorate any issues with us taking any light. And we also altered the windows of the proposed back extension, making them narrower than they are now to give more privacy. We changed the proposed render to keeping the same brick and hanging tiles, and will use a brick matching service to get a good likeness, and will repoint old areas to have a good seamless exterior finish. We intend to use top-of-the-range aluminium windows. The Council's Conservation Officer has assessed the submitted plans and concluded that by altering tideways as described, we would have a house that helps the transition between the other buildings in Tower Street and Spice Island House. He did comment that he encouraged further revision to the rear elevation, and we've instigated those changes too. The Conservation Officer commented that the proposal is of sufficient quality to secure conservation support. Overall, it is thought that these current plans to improve tideways have fully addressed the previous reason for refusal and would result in a scheme that is both respectful to nearby residents and the Old Portsmouth Conservation Area. Thank you for your time today, and hopefully you can endorse the Planning Officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Could I now move, if there are no further deputations, to questions, please? Darren?
Thanks, Judith. One of them I would like to ask via you to the applicant, because it relates to some of the drawings on here. Firstly, Simon, have we got a slide of what was refused at all? Because
Yes.
it just might be good to see the difference between the refused application and this one. If you haven't, you haven't.
Yep. So when it comes up in a moment. So the bottom ones are the proposals you've just seen. The rear elevation I've taken you through, the upper floor extension, and the new proposed front elevation. This was the refused scheme, so it's a little bit difficult to read because it's not done in the same colour and so on. But this one was rendered, as I say, and then the fenestration is slightly different. You might just pick up an overall slightly more pleasing proportion and subdivision of the fenestration on the proposed scheme. But the main difference was the material. This was supposed to be render. This is retained and matching brick.
Right, so on the right-hand side, this sort of two-stage development seems in both of them. The stage that's further out towards the road on the far right, that's in line with Spice Island House, is it not? Yes, that one.
Yes. So it just projects a tiny bit there before the chamfer. That'd be about 30-40 centimetres projection before the chamfer kicks it away at display.
Okay, that's fine.
While we're on, I'm just going to interrupt you. Tony, well, just while we're on this subject, could you confirm that the brickwork being proposed for this building is the same as the brickwork for the house next door on the right-hand side? Because this plan doesn't show that, and it makes it look rather starker than possibly is intended.
The brickwork will, Tideways and Number One have fairly similar bricks now,
Yeah.
And clearly the bricks that will be retained on the front of Tideways, if approved, those will be the ones that will be matched rather than next door, but they happen to be pretty similar to next door, but we'll obviously go for a very, very careful match to the existing property.
Thank you. Carry on.
Thank you,
Karen. I just thought while we were on that, it was...
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The next bit is around so we've had objections from Spice Island House. I understand, Simon. The area where it increases, where the area of Spice Island House that's directly affected, they talk about loss of privacy and overlooking. Are there any windows in that particular area? Is it just a wall? It looks like a wall to me, but I might be wrong.
The proposed extension, the applicant helpfully explained its dimensions, would run up this area here, including to the proposed new story, just about 30 centimetres, as I said, beyond the rear corner, and those are the nearest windows facing parallel, out to the east. So that's why they've been splayed away with the chamfer, just to reduce any impact looking out of one of the neighbours' windows and seeing the new development to your right-hand side. I think you'd struggle to see it at all, even with your head against the pane and looking sideways, because of the limited depth and the chamfer.
Yeah. It looked like it was climbing a wall, as opposed to blocking any windows.
Sorry, Councillor.
It looked like it was climbing a wall rather than blocking any windows.
Yes, it's not blocking those windows, no.
Okay, that's fine. And then my final one is that the applicant, and thank you, Dr. Kelly, for that. The applicant said that the conservation officer had asked for further changes. Are those changes actually on the application, or are those one of those things that might need to be added post-match?
No, they are on here. It was further refinement to the rear elevation in particular. We discussed the appearance of the rear extension, all the details we discussed with the applicant and the agent about the windows, the reveals, the quality of the design and the materials. And to answer your point, it was the reveal here and the decorative brickwork just in the slight element between the windows. So it's fine details as you might expect with a heritage building in a conservation area.
And so just one final question, if I may, Judith. In paragraph 8.2, you talk about the neighbour to the south, who is number 1 Tideways. Has number 1 Tideways objected to the scheme?
No, they positively wrote in and said no objection.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, Judith.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Mason.
The fenestration, this is in aluminium, is it? If so, is this of a conservation standard? Are the windows opening? Could you say something about the structure of the fenestration?
Yes, they are aluminium, a dark grey as I recall. The method of opening, I'm afraid I don't recall. I'm sorry. But all those details would be covered by condition 3, as is normal with a new building in particular in a conservation area. So the detailed schedule of materials and finishes, including fenestration, so material, colour, opening mechanism and reveals, etc. So all those important details, we've had some of them in, enough to satisfy us that we're going in the right direction, and we'll, if approved, conclude the final agreements on the final details.
Any further questions? Councillor Simpson.
Are the current windows that are in now, are they already double glazed, i.e. efficient, energy efficient?
My recollection is, and the applicant's shaking her head, that they are not double glazed.
Just to follow up, because obviously there is a bit of a conflict with the house to the right, obviously the newer apartment that isn't, but this is obviously more of a question actually for the doctor behind me, but consideration of just getting double glazed like for like windows they're in now, but I know that's a little bit away from what we're discussing.
Yeah, that's not the proposal in front of us. The applicant's desire is to have a contemporary feel, both in terms of appearance and obviously a contemporary and modern efficiency in terms of insulation, including, of course, the thermal capacity of the windows, which of course will be dealt with by building regulations. So, and in her deputation, the applicant mentioned the desire to have the best quality environmental standards as well. So that'll be controlled by the building regulations.
Councillor Fielding.
Going back to the windows, on the front elevation on the second floor, to the left adjoining Spice Island house, does the window wrap itself around onto the western?
It does. It does.
Is that obscured in any way, or is that where the objection has come in respect of being overlooked?
I'm trying to remember now, because we did look at that before. I think if we haven't specified it being obscurely glazed, that's frosted. I can't remember if that's mentioned in the report, but I think that is a good idea to make sure, and I don't believe that would be an objection to the neighbour. I don't believe it's likely to cause any issue for the neighbour. We're talking about that window, which indeed wraps around the corner. You notice that it's set between stories. I'm happy, if you would like, to wrap that up in the condition, just to look further at the possibility of the need for frosted glazing and the opening, just to make sure if there is deemed to be any potential impact, we can control it.
Is this the proposed west elevation we're looking at?
It's actually the north elevation, this north, which is a side elevation.
Yes. Yep. But it's not. It's aligned with the other windows, isn't it?
Well, it's in front.
Mm.
So it's. Yes, it's yes, it's that window there that turns the corner.
Mm.
I think it's an unlikely major effect, but we're happy, if you would like, to change the condition, amend the condition, just to make sure we pick it up formally.
I'm not proposing that. Looking at the plans, it doesn't look to be substantial enough to overlook the adjoining balcony. I would take my colleagues' views on that, whether we should put a condition on there, but I'm happy to proceed as is.
Thank you.
That was a good spot by George, but I think it stepped far enough forward to avoid that. But it was a good spot. If it was more in line and looking down on the Preston's balcony, then I think that would be a fair point. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffries.
Could I just check with 7.4? Presumably, if the officers are recommending it, the planning application, you're satisfied that the guidelines will be stuck to?
We are, Councillor. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I move now, if there are no more questions, to comments and recommendations? Councillor Jeffries.
Yeah, it was. So this is my first planning committee, so it was really interesting. What was interesting for me was when I first saw this, I was really concerned about the frontage of the building, because it looked like it was going to be completely different. But the officers sort of satisfied me that that wouldn't be the case. I'm really pleased that the brickwork would be the same.
Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Well, we haven't been cribbing, but I had exactly the same. I looked at the paperwork and I thought, this is a no-goer. This is old Portsmouth. I don't think I like this. It's meant to enhance, but actually, I think it looks like a good scheme. It looks as if they've worked this through well, and I'm therefore happy to propose the officer recommendation for approval.
Would anybody like to second that? Councillor Mason.
Yes, I'd like to second that. I consider that the lines of the fenestration are nice and clean. They are very much better than the scheme which was turned down earlier. As for how it fits into Old Portsmouth, this area of Old Portsmouth has varied in its architecture, to say the least, and so I don't have any problems about that. So I think it is a good scheme.
Thank you. I actually drove down there this morning and had a job to find the house, but but also I think presentationally it would have been good to have had the brickwork presented as the same or very, very similar in the application. We've got proposer and a seconder. Do we have any alternative views? So we'll move to a vote, for the application as described and recommended by the officers. All those in favour, raise your hands. Okay, no abstentions and nobody against. I'm so sorry. Have we got any abstentions or any refusal? Abstention. Okay. Thank you. So we have still have the planning application approved. Thank you very much. So I want to move now on to 192 Laburnum Grove. Change of use from a dwelling house Class C3 to a 6-bedroom house in multiple occupation Class C4. Could I ask you to introduce it to us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, 192 Laburnum Grove, change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a 6-bedroomed HMO, small HMO Class C4. The application is coming because of 14 objections, and we have a supplementary matters update in a moment. Just to locate you, sorry about the slightly blurred plan, but that's the property in the middle of that terrace, south-facing garden. There it is, labelled with an arrow in the middle of that terrace. With a front yard there, quite a decent sized front yard. There it is. If you look on the roof, it says number 192 with a greyer roof. That is it. You can see some roof windows there, previous extensions, so it already has been extended. So there are no further roof extensions proposed with this one. And then you can see the backyard there.
Chair, could I just ask, could we have the officer show us with the green pointer? It just would help me, thank you.
That property there. Thank you. So moving on to the considerations, the planning merits, starting with whether or not the community already has an imbalance or not. There's the 50-metre radius, so 2 sites are already in HMO use, or consented at least. So the percentage is, if this were approved as well, would take us to 6.98, still below the 10% policy threshold. So in general terms, and based on the merits of this particular application, we don't believe it would lead to an imbalanced local community, and we are satisfied that there wouldn't be a more localised adverse effect on amenity for the neighbours either. In respect to floor plans, as the existing house with a typical terraced approach with the rear wing leading to the back, upstairs bedrooms, 2 bathrooms there, and in the roof space already those 3 rooms up there already. So limited physical alterations to the property, no more external alterations or extensions. 6 bedrooms. So a dining room on the front, a kitchen separate in the middle, a big utility room there, and then at the back a kitchen diner, or the dining room I should say, the kitchen separate there. On the first floor, 3 individual bedrooms, 1 shower room and toilet, 1 shared bathroom and toilet, and then on the top floor 3 individual bedrooms. And there is a loo under the stairs as existing. Thank you, Chair. So the living conditions are deemed to be acceptable because the standards are met or exceeded. Well, slight variations around the kitchen, dining and living room, but the utility room is a large facility, 6.5 square metres, lots of storage space, washing machine, etc., etc., as an extra really that would normally be accommodated in the kitchen. So in the round we're happy with the sizes and layout and overall dimensions of the property. Therefore, it's recommended for approval, notwithstanding the objections. Turning to the supplementary matters, Local Highways Authority, we've got no objection from them concerning the highway network, and they advise it should have 4 parking spaces, which we already have conditioned. And then private sector housing, we've secured their comments, which are no adverse comments, providing the usable area of any loft rooms exceeds 6.51. They do. And they just note for completeness that based on the layout and sizes proposed, it would require to be licensed. Thank you.
It seems to me...
Councillor Fielding.
Thank you. It seems to me to some extent that the horse has bolted on this one because it's already being used as an HMO. Why are we... Firstly, has it been inspected to meet all space standards and bike storage? Because it says there's space for 6 bikes at the rear of the property, securely, I would assume. And if so, why we're not dealing with this in terms of enforcement? Have we missed the ball on this one, basically?
Thank you, Councillor. My understanding is that it's a dwelling house, lawfully, still. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, so perhaps it's from one of the objections where they say it appears to be already used as an HMO. I'm not aware of that. What often or can happen is that a property may be in a state of some refurbishment, anticipating or hoping for a consent. If they didn't get a consent, it could still be used as C3, albeit refurbished. That's sometimes what can happen, Councillor, which may lead to a comment like that. But even if it were already occupied unlawfully, we wouldn't take enforcement action until and unless the application was refused, A, and B, we felt it was expedient to take enforcement action. So we would normally seek to determine the application and then take it from there. Space for bikes, yes, I pointed out at the start it's got quite a big front yard which could accommodate a bike store there and or through the back as per so many other properties.
Question from me while we're waiting for others to think of questions. One of the issues raised in representations was the statement that the property... Oh yes, the property is already in use as an HMO. Now I'm picking up the same thing. I thought that was about next door. Are there existing HMOs adjoining the property? Have we checked that out? That's under paragraph 5.2.
Yes, no, the other 2 HMOs are 2 or 3 doors there to the east and diagonally opposite to the northwest. So there's no sandwiching or anything like that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Jeffries.
Yeah, sorry if it's repeating what you've both just have said as well, but so the comment from the council about the HMO record needs to be updated, is that different from what has just been asked, or is that something that we need to consider?
No, Councillor, I think that is a slightly different question. This is a common, I think Councillor Swan, from recollection, and 1 or 2 other councillors believe that our HMO records aren't everything that they ought to be. For your information and anyone else listening, we have 3 main sources of data which informs the data count you can see. Those are the council tax records, the HMO licensing records, and any planning history we have. And then what we do in any event for each HMO application is write to the 3 local councillors and say, here's the data count. Do you know from your local experience, is it any different? And we'll respond to any thoughts they may have. Or indeed, if a local resident says, I think next door's already an HMO and you haven't counted it, we will investigate that as well and see whether or not the data needs to be updated. But in the round, we are happy with the robustness of our data to start with.
Thank you very much. Further questions? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. Can I ask Simon, in paragraph 7.8,
the size required for the 6th bedroom is significantly smaller than the size required for all the others. Can I ask why?
Well spotted, Councillor. I think that's a typo. All the bedrooms are 6.51 from recollection. That's just a typo. 3.74 is for a bathroom, so apologies for that. That's a typo. It's 6.5 and the bedroom exceeds that, so that's all as it should be.
Thank you. My second question to Simon through you is, when you were talking through the plan, Simon, you said that the front room on the ground floor was going to be a dining room. I am a nasty, cynical person, and the thought did occur to me that the landlord might try to convert that into an extra bedroom. What conditions could we put on to make sure that that was not allowed to happen? Because he's coming for a planning application and planning permission with this stated as a dining room, and I don't want it to sneak through becoming a 7-bedroomed property without it coming back for permission, or well, preferably saying no to it automatically. So Simon, what conditions can we put on to make sure that the landlord does what he says he's going to do, or she's going to do?
Thank you, Councillor. This is an application for a C4, so that naturally caps it at 6 occupiers. So they'd have to apply. We can't physically stop someone from doing something unlawful if they go and do it. So we wouldn't propose a condition. They've got 6 other bedrooms, which clearly would be a single occupancy each. Were they to occupy that, they would need planning permission, and we would open an enforcement case to investigate it, decide where to take it. So, but to try and answer your question as well in another way, the application shall be carried out in accordance with the plans. That's condition 2. So effectively that's saying you've got 6 bedrooms, those are bedrooms, and you've got ground floor shared accommodation, dining, lounge, kitchen, utility room. Those are the plans we're approving. If it's approved today, that's what you need to provide. So that is, if you like, a form of control there.
Councillor Van Jackson, I'm sure we had some of those same thoughts, but it is all stated on the application.
So I'm aware that the head of planning in the city view is that no application is required for moving from a 6 to a 7-person HMO. How can we protect, in this case, that would not happen, and that it would have to come back to a planning committee if there was any suggestion that might happen?
We made very clear recommendation about these kind of cases at our planning committee 2 committees back. I think we made very clear that we thought that was development and did need to come to committee.
Yes, I think Julie, I think you're right. We made clear. I'm not always sure things that we say are always heard.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for pointing that out. I mean, but that is the current position of this committee, isn't it? I take your point. I understand the point you're making. But the position of the committee at the moment is, as you state, the committee, or the chairman, the chair states that planning permission would be required. That's why I repeated that, notwithstanding officers' views. So there you are. It's effectively under control, your control at present. And that's as much as we can do at the moment.
We took a clear vote on it, and as stated, this doesn't allow that possibility. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you. Firstly, just to support Gerald on this. The head of planning has also said previously that under permitted development rights, 4-bedroom properties can go to 5, can go to 6, can go to 7. So what is to stop the landlord, or sorry, the developer, I should say, defying what he has told you and the rest of the team, Simon, and turning a utility room or a lounge or a dining room into a bedroom under PD?
We've made a decision as a committee that that's not what we want to happen.
I accept that, Judith, but that thank you for that, but that is not the answer to my question, which is what is to stop a developer from doing it, then doing a retrospective application if they're forced to, or hoping that nobody notices.
Simon.
Which is okay under permitted development rights, which is the view of the Assistant Director of Planning, and I respect that view.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I said earlier, there's nothing to stop the developer. They carry that out at their own risk. They know what the position is at the moment, and we can't anticipate something like that. It may or may not happen. We can only react to it were it to happen. But the current state of play is that they're applying for a C4, and that's what is in front of us, and that's what we need to determine.
Okay. I have a couple of other unrelated questions to that, Judith, if I may.
You may ask
the first is the kitchen. The kitchen is the one room that falls below our SPD standards. How big is the kitchen now? You've given me a diagram below. You gave us an illustration only, but unfortunately I was unable to check how big the kitchen was. It looks bigger than now, but that's not quite accurate.
Yeah, well, it's a kitchen diner, and I don't have a dimension on that, Councillor. Right. And the proposal is to separate it off and have the kitchen here.
Right.
So
it will involve repurposing some rooms on the ground floor, won't it? Unlike the one in Port Solent earlier on.
That's right.
Okay. How many people can live there now as a dwelling house? It's a six-bedroom dwelling house,
yeah.
So what are all the rules for people living there?
There are no
11,
rules.
12?
You could have one person living in there, or whatever the size of your family is.
Right. Okay, I will take Gerald's raised offer of 44. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Simpson.
Actually, just going back to that, it appears to already be an HMO, and I know we kind of deviated away from it, but we would have had the letters of objection beforehand, and if there does seem to be an accusation that it is an HMO, what is the protocol for it being investigated before it comes to us for appeal? Or sorry, for application.
Thank you, Councillor. We do visit each property anyway to just for information to make sure it is what it is, or we're aware if it's anything different. So we're visited. But as I said a few moments ago, in any event, even if the change of use had already occurred, it would be premature to consider enforcement action unless we got a decision on the application. If the application were to be refused, and then we've got an unlawful use, then we would consider whether or not we'd want to pursue it any further. If it's approved, end of story.
Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you. Can I just seek clarification? Can the committee decide to approve this, but still decide to limit the number of people who could be there to 6, for example?
Sorry, Councillor, could you say that again?
Yeah, sure. Can I just clarify whether the committee can approve this planning application, but still add in an amendment to limit the number of people to 6 people living there?
Well, it's back to the question we had before about some time ago about the tests, about necessity. Typically is one of the tests about whether or not you have any conditions. Planning consent has been sought for 3 to 6 people to live together, unrelated people, as a household. So you can't have more than 6. That's what the consent is. So there's no need to condition it.
Thank you. Right, if there are no further questions, I'll move on. Councillor Vernon-Jackson? We'll move on to comments and towards a recommendation. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Thanks. I hear what Simon Turner has said, and I don't think there's a choice in this one, but I am concerned about the idea of that living room becoming a 7th one. So I think there is a reason in this case to put a condition on that it is for 6 people only. I know it's tautological, but it is, I think in this case it is justified, and I think that's what the planning committee is meant to do, is to look at each individual planning application and make a decision on each one. And I think, therefore, I think there is a good reason here to put a condition on as 6 people only.
Could we do that? Is that allowed in this circumstance?
As the planning officer has already advised, it's not necessary to put on a condition, so it would not be necessary or reasonable. The council is dealing with any increase in number by bringing planning applications to the planning committee, and therefore you would have to decide on it then. So
the question was, could we do it? Not would it be...
I'm advising you against it,
okay.
as did the planning officer.
So I'd like to formally move that we do have that condition added.
Councillor Jeffries?
I would second that.
Are there any other proposals for us to consider after this recommendation? Okay. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just make one important clarification on the matter of 6 to 7 occupiers between C4 and sui generis HNO? Just to remind the committee and myself that we're considering each and every application rather than the big... You've just referred to it there, Councillor, haven't you? So thank you. It's not the position of the planning committee that every C4 to sui generis 6 or 7 or 8 person occupancy requires planning permission. It will depend on the merits, the individual circumstances of each.
My understanding is there is a need for planning application in those cases. What I'm saying is we don't predetermine them, and there in this case I just think that it is a sensible precaution to put a condition in.
Can I ask another question then? Would it be... we understand your advice on what we should do. Is it going to cause us any additional problems with the law if we do put a condition on?
The applicant can apply to have that condition removed, is the under section 73A.
Okay, well that's that doesn't mean to say we can't.
Then we'll have called his bluff.
Yeah. So can I move to a vote?
I didn't hear that. Do you mind repeating that, please?
There is a method of applying for permission whereby you can ask for conditions to be removed from planning permissions. So there'd be the original permission sitting there, and then there would be the new one sitting next to it.
That's fine. Okay, thank you very much for that advice. We've got one recommendation that we apply a condition limiting the occupancy to 6 people as is described on the application, and we have a proposer and a seconder. Can I ask that we move to a vote to approve the application subject to that condition being added? All those in favour? All those against? All those abstaining? 1 abstention. Thank you very much. Well, the applicant has their permission, but subject to a condition that the occupation is limited to 6 beds. Thank you all very much. We have that's the end of this committee as far as I'm concerned. You're going to carry on and discuss item 3, which is my planning application, in which I have an interest. And Hugh is going to take over my seat here as chair, and I will duly depart. And thank you all very much, meanwhile, for planning committee today, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. We've still got lots of work to do, and thank you for your cooperation today.
And thank you for chairing, Judith.
Thank you. A nice warm seat for you, Councillor Mason.
Have a good afternoon.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the officers, of course, as well.
For the benefit of new members of this committee, any application made by a member of this committee has to be brought to full committee for decision. And so we have before us 41 St Vincent Road, Southsea, an application for construction of a single-storey rear and side extension on behalf of Councillor Judith Smythe. Can we have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to locate members, there's St Vincent Road and the red dot. You've got Exmouth Road running north up to Albert Road and the King's Theatre, and then just to the west you've got Marmion Road starting and running west into Southsea Town Centre. So hopefully that's located it for you. It's a two-storey house in a typical Southsea Portsmouth street. Here's the existing rear elevation, just to give you a feel of the proposed rear extension. The lean-to you can see there with the little outbuilding, that will be replaced and have a new extension in the same position, but also filling the light well up the side of the property there, up along the rear wing. So there's on the left-hand side the existing image you've just seen, the rear lean-to. So that would be replaced at the end of the wing by this new pitched roof extension, but it would also run up the side of the rear wing, as I said, into the light well. You may note the low height of the eaves on either side. That's been designed specifically to reduce the impact on the neighbours. The plans aren't great, but you can see on the north, at the top image, the gap. It doesn't show the side boundary, unfortunately, but the side boundary runs parallel to this wall along there. Excuse the light dancing around. So that's the light well, we call it, running alongside the boundary, and that would be filled with the new extension wrapped around in an L shape. Next door, well, here's a typical arrangement. On the right you've got the kitchen window, you can see the boiler flue there, and then a living room window looking down the light well in the application site, and then next door would appear to have the same arrangement. There's a boiler flue and kitchen window, and then the rear living room window has been enclosed in what looks like a back door and a lean-to, but that light well would be the area infilled by the proposed extension. As the report sets out, these can be more sensitive because of the proximity to the neighbour, but the application has been designed with a particularly low eaves height, lower indeed by 10 centimetres than the 2 metre boundary wall or fence you could have in place instead. So it's lower than a permitted development fence, and also lower than a permitted development side extension at 3 metres high. So because of those combinations of fallback factor and the limited effect from the proposal itself, we're happy to recommend it for approval. There were no objections from any party.
Thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
I'm just checking, is this where Judith lives?
It is not where she is currently living.
Oh, so this is part of her landlord's portfolio.
It is likely that she will downsize, though that is not a planning consideration.
I have been trying to downsize for years, but I keep getting fatter.
Sorry?
I've been trying to downsize for years, but I keep getting fatter.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think she would object to my telling you that from her current large premises, she is looking to something smaller. Yes. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Hugh. Simon, if this were not a member of this committee or a councillor, would this have just gone through with no objections at all? Would this have gone through under delegated approval?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Comments from members, please. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Happy to propose this.
I'm happy to second.
Right, thank you. Are there any further comments? Will those in favour please indicate? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes the meeting, and thank you for the courtesy you have shown to the substitute chair.
And can we record our thanks to the officers as well?